Hello everyone. This is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto Uzumaki became a chaotic genius prank master and changed his destiny alongside Ino and Hinata, Naruto times Ino times Hinata, Part 2. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. Coat laying over the arm of his couch, Naruto was leaning comfortably back against it as he kept his notebook propped up against his thigh. Though his eyes would occasionally wander in the direction of the bathroom, he refused to get up and check. Hinata was taking care of it, and he wanted to make sure she knew he believed in that she'd be able to do a good job. Finally, he could hear the sound of the door opening. While he kept adding notes here and there to the book, he lifted his eyes to see both girls softly blushing as they exited the bathroom. Better. Much. Naruto-kun. Ino nodded, a smile on her lips as she looked at him a bit differently than before, as if the light had changed just enough to make a difference in how she saw him. Thank you. Thank Hinata-chan. The boy shrugged. It's her cream and she's the one that took care of you. Oh, I already did. The blonde smiled as she gently hugged her arm about Hinata's waist as she lightly reached out and lightly brushed against the dark hair. And I'm really glad that I ended up on this team. A slight twinge of jealousy erupted inside of Naruto as he watched the blush creep across Hinata's face as she quietly let herself lean into the caress. Forcefully he pushed it down as he offered up a gentle little smile. I see you two are getting along. The flash across his eyes had lasted only an instant before the smile had come, but the sudden twitch of both girls' lips downward made him struggle not to wince. Gently, he shifted his body, pushing up as he brought his feet to the ground and took hold of his coat, as he continued, well, I do believe I promised lunch, right? Naruto-kun. Hinata spoke up, a hesitance to her voice as she looked at him with a worried longing as next to her, Ino remained silent, uncertain. Come on, I'm sure you're both hungry, the both said cheerfully, I know I am. As he held the door open for them both, they reluctantly nodded as they stepped forward, followed shortly by the boy as he shut and locked the door behind him. Both girls noticed, however, as this time, he stayed close, but it was no longer that comforting presence, his hands gently on their bodies in that soft comforting manner. Both noticed, and could feel the frowns growing on their lips. The cheery mask on his face, Naruto walked down the street, until the girls quickly caught up with him, and forcibly grabbed hold of his arms from either side. Blinking a bit, his mask slipped for a moment as he stiffened, his body almost recoiling from their touch, before he gently leaned back against their warm bodies. Tentatively, he would bring his arms up, before he could feel slender fingers from each girl taking hold, and guiding his hands to their waists. We're in this together, Naruto-kun. Hinata spoke up quietly, giving the boy's hand a squeeze as she would slip her arm against his back. So, you better remember that. Ino spoke up, a bit of her usual fire back in her eyes as put her own arm across Hinata's and lightly stroked the boy's back. Sheepishly, the boy nodded his head, his fingers moving up as he would carefully stroke along the girls' backs before cautiously stroking against their hair. Or, more accurately, stroking through Hinata's hair, and lightly caressing against the back of Ino's neck in the same manner as he caressed Hinata's hair. His attention turned to Ino though, as she giggled softly and began to speak. Should I start wearing my hair down then, Naruto-kun? The girl grinned softly at the boy as she lightly tightened her grip on his back, so you and stroke it like you do with Hinata-chan. Hey, we'll see, the boy responded easily enough, ignoring the looks they were getting as the girls allowed themselves to be led where Naruto wanted. Sometime later, as they began to take their seats the ramen shop, Ino suddenly wrapped her arms about Naruto and gave him a firm hug. Is it usually like that for you, Naruto-kun? What do you mean, Ino-chan? The boy responded cautiously as he would lightly bring one hand up to slowly stroke against her back. The looks, she responded as she took a seat, all those people with their cold eyes following you. Nay, the boy shrugged softly, a lot of people in the village don't like me, it's no big deal. Yeah, it is. The blonde girl countered back, you're a good guy. They shouldn't be giving you those kind of looks, like you're some kind of grr. Right, Hinata-chan. The girl nodded quietly as she looked up at Naruto as the boy shrugged in response, a good guy who likes to prank ninjas left and right, then lead them on merry chases all throughout the village. Still, they're just pranks. Ino protested. That's no reason for them to treat you like that. Ino-chan. The boy paused a moment, before looking from one girl to the other. Look, there is a reason they look at me that way. Just leave it at that for now, alright. And Naruto-kun. Hinata looked at him, worriedly. For now, Hinata-chan, he said softly, his arms gently sliding down to each of the girls' shoulders, and giving them a soft hug. So, what's it going to be today? The older man behind the counter asked with a soft grin on his face. Did you get yourself another girlfriend, or is this your teammate Naruto? The two girls blushed softly as they glanced as one towards Naruto, then one another, before blushing even more as they fidgeted softly in their seats. The boy himself paused a moment, as thinking before he grinned before turning his head towards Hinata. I don't know Hinata-chan, do I have another girlfriend, or do you? Immediately the girl in question blushed crimson as she furtively glanced over at the similarly blushing Ino and gave a little shrug, whichever Ino-chan wants. Oh ho. The man behind the counter chuckled. Well now, one thing's for certain, you never cease being interesting Naruto. So what can I get for you and your lovely ladies? Ino herself didn't quite respond to Hinata's words, she honestly wasn't sure herself of what the answer really was. Did she want to be the girl's girlfriend? Did she want to be Naruto's? She wasn't even close to being sure. The whole relationship would be all kinds of complicated, and then there was Sasuke. The girl paused a moment, as a curious thought entered her head. Was there even a Sasuke to consider? She shook her head a bit before looking up to the man, who was watching her with that easy smile. Waiting, I'll have a bowl of chicken ramen. 2 beef for me, the boy added quickly as he kept his arms wrapped familiarly about the girl's shoulders. 1 shrimp ramen please, the dark-haired girl piped up as she leaned a bit closer into Naruto's side. Coming right up, the man responded as he grinned back at the trio. As the man got to work, Ino felt herself leaning against Naruto much the same as Hinata was. It felt nice, she realized, warm, reassuring. And he was so willing to give it, unlike Sasuke. She couldn't help but wonder, was Sasuke really what she wanted? What's on your mind Ino-chan? Naruto spoke up as he watched the blonde girl's brow furrow in thought. Huh, the girl responded, blinking a bit, just thinking about stuff I guess. What? Stuff like if you wanna be Hinata-chan's girlfriend or not. The boy teased her, softly as she could feel him reaching up, lightly stroking the lock of hair she kept free along her cheek. Kinda. That and, she paused a moment, her body stiffening slightly before she admitted, Sasuke. Ah. There was a distance to the tone from the boy, as he could feel Hinata stiffen at his other side warily. I'm just not sure what to think, the girl explained honestly. I mean, this morning. He was everything I ever thought I could want in a guy. Good looking, cool, powerful, smart. She paused a moment before narrowing her eyes and looking at the two sitting next to her. And then you two come along, kidnap me, do all those things to me. She blushed brightly at that. Now, I just don't know. What? Now looking forward to the next time we kidnap you. The boy spoke up with a bit of a grin as Hinata couldn't help but giggle softly next to him. HMPH. The girl grunted as she playfully punched his arm in response, before blushing softly as she continued, maybe. I think we'll have to worry about Anko-sensei following us next time. Hinata spoke up softly. I think she felt left out. Ino and Naruto both shivered at that as he chuckled nervously. That's Anko-chan for ya. So, Ino grinned suddenly as she looked up at Naruto. How's it feel to be the envy of our class huh? The blonde boy blinked as she looked back at Ino. What are you talking about? Well, come on. The girl grinned, giggling softly. You're on a team with 2 of the hottest girls in our class, and you have not 1, but 2 hot kunoichi teachers. Didn't you see the looks the guys were throwing you back in class? Not really. The boy shrugged a bit before chuckling. I'm kinda used to getting looks, so I just ignore 'em. He paused a moment, mulling over the situation, before grinning. We should definitely mess with them though. Ooh. The blonde girl grinned as she looked at the boy. What did you have in mind? HM. There was a wicked grin on his face as he would picture something in his mind. Well, how would you like to give those perverts a nosebleed they'll never forget? Naughty. Hinata pipped up, blushing even brighter though she had a small, predatory little smile on her lips. The blonde girl grinned for a moment before she leaned in, sweetly whispering loudly enough for Hinata to hear. How naughty, do you think we should be, Naruto-kun? Well, the boy grinned back at them, a mischievous grin on his lips. I was thinking you should go take Hinata-chan shopping and see what you two could come up with. Ino's eyes instantly gleamed as she grinned wickedly back at Naruto, in an almost predatory manner. Oh, really? Hey, the boy grinned back at the blonde girl before looking at Hinata. Well, Hinata-chan, what do you think? I think that. Hinata blushed brightly as she stumbled over her words for a moment. That, she took a slow deep breath before nodding, that we shouldn't let Naruto-kun come shopping, so he gets a surprise too. Hey, sounds like Hinata-chan has an idea already. Ino grinned just as the ramen chef began to lay out their bowls in front of them. Here we go. The man grinned broadly at the three, for my favorite customer and his favorite ladies. The three blushed lightly at the man's words, though the girls more than Naruto himself before they took up their chopsticks and thanked the man. Thank you, Ichiraku-san. Now, just enjoy your meal. The man grinned softly as he turned back and began to work on cleaning up the small mess he'd made. Ramen. Naruto drooled happily as he inhaled the wondrous scent, before offering up a small prayer of thanks. Hey, you're silly, Naruto-kun, Ino practically giggled as she would begin to peck at her ramen bit by bit. Ramen is to be devoured and savored. The boy countered with a broad grin, before lightly poking against the blonde girl's arm, so start eating. Hey, I really shouldn't eat too much, I'm on a diet, the girl protested back. No, the boy said plainly as he crossed his arms about his chest, no diets, you need to eat. Hey, I gotta keep this slim figure somehow. The girl countered back, what, want me to get fat? Ino-chan, the boy tsked softly, are you a ninja, or a vapid bimbo? Hey. The girl immediately felt her face flush as she couldn't figure out just what the sudden comment meant. I'm a ninja, of course. Then stop being stupid. He reached forward and lightly flicked her forehead with his finger. I'm not stupid. Or some vapid bimbo. The girl growled back, her eyes beginning to burn dangerously. Why the hell are you saying something stupid like that? Because you're acting stupid. The boy responded while Hinata winced slightly at the bluntness of his words. I mean, seriously, Ino-chan. A ninja needs all the food they can get, otherwise, how the hell are you gonna be able to train properly? The girl blinked slightly in confusion as she looked back at the boy, not sure just how to react. What Naruto-kun is saying, Hinata spoke up, slowly, carefully as she looked over into Ino's eyes. Is that you're a ninja, Ino-chan? She paused a moment before continuing. That means, instead of eating less, you train more, and get stronger. Eating less means you train less, and can get a lot less out of training. So, eat plenty, right, Naruto-kun? Yup. Besides, the blonde boy paused before grinning at Ino. I'm paying, so eat. But, the girl blushed a bit, before mumbling softly, I want to look good. The boy blinked, looking at the girl oddly. What are you talking about? You do look good, right, Hinata-chan? The pale-eyed girl quickly nodded her head in agreement as she smiled shyly at Ino. Yes, Ino-chan is very beautiful. But, the girl started to protest again. Ino-chan, the boy paused, as his tone shifted, the playfulness gone as his eyes hardened. You look great, and if you don't stop protesting and eat your ramen, I'm going to put you over my knee and spank you right here and now. The blonde girl immediately blushed crimson, as she couldn't help but make a simple little comment. Promise. Naruto's palm immediately went to his face as he sighed at Hinata. We've created a monster. Hey. But, she's a cute monster, right, Naruto-kun? Hinata smiled as she responded, a slight giggle in her words. Naruto took a moment, eyeing the blonde speculatively before he reached out, cupping her cheek as he leaned in and whispered against the girl's ear. Yes, very cute. The girl in question blushed crimson as Naruto ever so casually leaned a bit closer in, his words teasing against her ear. Now, eat your ramen, Ino-chan. Why yes, Naruto-kun. The girl fumbled over her response, nodding with a heavy blush on her face. Good girl. With a grin on his face, the boy dove into his own ramen with an eager grin. The bowls quickly drained away, bit by bit, as the three continued to eat. Curiosity on his face, Naruto casually looked back at Ino as he asked, "So, what all are you good at, Ino-chan?" "I know what Hinata-chan's good at, and I'm pretty sure you can guess what I'm good at." "I know you're a mind walker, but what else do you do?" The girl froze immediately, then looked down sheepishly with a sigh. "That's pretty much it right now." "Huh." The boy paused a moment, before shrugging lightly. "Well, Hinata-chan's mainly close range. I'm more mid-range, so I guess we should work on your long-range skills." "Why yeah." Hinata spoke up quickly. "That should balance things out more." She paused, before smiling back at the girl. "Plus, we need to keep our best interrogate safe, right?" The girl blushed softly with a slow little nod as she noticed Naruto suddenly grinning, almost ferally at her. "Oh, I don't know. I could think of a number of ways to keep her." "Eep." Ino blushed even brighter at the boy's words while a shiver ran its way down her spine, meaning. The boy leaned in, before slowly, softly, whispering into her ear, "Well, Ino-chan, why don't you use your imagination, nay?" She only blushed even brighter as Naruto pulled back, his warmth breath lingering on her pale skin before he winked, knowingly at a blushing Hinata. However, before he could continue, a voice rose up behind them, calling out, "AHA. I found you." Naruto and the girls all blinked before looking over their shoulders to find the accusatory finger of Konohamaru pointing at them. "Oh, it's you." The boy shrugged softly before turning around and returning to his ramen. "Hey, don't turn your back on me." The boy screamed out. "Nay, Ino-chan, Hinata-chan," the boy casually asked. "Anyone else hear this weird, squeaking sound?" "And no, Naruto-kun," Hinata responded with a smile. "I don't hear anything." "Nah, must be your imagination, Naruto-kun," Ino nodded with a grin, catching on as they all worked on finishing their ramen. "Stop ignoring me." The boy practically screamed as he jumped up onto Naruto's back and started to punch at the thick material of his trenchcoat. "Huh." Naruto twitched slightly as he glanced at the boy. "Hey, little monkey, aren't you supposed to be bothering the old monkey or something?" "Ha ha, I've got you now," the boy said triumphantly as he grabbed hold of the collar of the jacket. Shrugging slightly, Naruto let the coat slide of his shoulders, letting the boy drop onto the ground behind him. "Yeesh, talk about a brat. Who is this Naruto-kun?" Ino spoke up, as she looked down at the boy struggling against the trench coat. Just a little monkey by the name of Konohamaru." The whisper-marked boy shrugged slightly as he would casually take another bit of his ramen. "No clue why he's chasing after me though." Konohamaru. Hinata blinked, as in, the Hokage's grandson. "Yup, familiar with him." The blonde arched a brow curiously at Hinata as he casually rapped Konohamaru on the top of his head with his knuckles as the boy tried to jump at him again. "Behave, brat." "Why yes," the girl nodded, "he keeps chasing after Hanabi." Instantly Naruto's eyes narrowed as he turned and cast a chilly gaze down at the boy. "So, you've been bothering Hinata-chan's sister him?" Instantly the boy pulled the coat back up, half cowering beneath it as he was caught by that chilly gaze. "I see. Nothing to say for yourself him." He nodded to himself before he reached down, and grabbed hold of the boy, lifting him up to his eyes. "That just confirms your guilt." "Wah. Hey." The boy growled as he started trying to kick at Naruto's chest. "I don't bother Hanabi-chan." "Oh. Re-e-e-a-a-a-a-a-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-l-y." The boy drew out the word with an almost angry hiss as he looked down at the boy. "Hanabi-chan. Awfully familiar with Hanabi-sama, He paused, before turning Hinata. "Hinata-chan. Does your father need to have words with this little monkey?" "Well, Naruto-kun, I do believe he mentioned something along those lines." The girl paused, her finger going to her lip as she looked up, as if in thought. "Something about teaching him some manners, I think it was." "Well, then, we shouldn't keep a clan head waiting, now should we, little monkey?" The blonde boy grinned downright wickedly as he looked down at Konohamaru. The boy in question gulped audibly as he stared up at the blue-eyed boy. "And no need for that. It's not like that, I swear." "Tisk, the shame of it all, the outrage." Naruto bemoaned, the grandson of the Hokage, attempting to molest the poor, sweet, innocent daughter of the head of the Hyuga clan. Have you no shame? No decency? Sweet. Innocent. Hinata spoke up questioningly. Okay. So she's a whiny brat with a stick up her. Naruto grinned. But hey, you're ruining my fun. Hey. Don't say that about Hanabi-ch-sama. The dark-haired Konohamaru protested. Naruto rapped the boy again atop his head with his free hand. Oh, hush, I've known her longer than you, monkey boy. Naruto-kun. Hinata spoke up with a soft reprimand in her voice. What? I have. The boy grumbled softly as he would keep the squirming boy well in hand. I did enough bodyguard duty, not to mention the diaper changing. No kid should have to do that. Hinata giggled slightly while Ino just stared at the two of them. Yeesh, I'm gonna guess you've known each other a long time. Damn it. Let me down already. Konohamaru. And quit talking like I'm not here. Naruto shrugged, casually tossing the boy back onto the street with a yawn. Why are you here anyway? Teach me. The boy demanded. No. Naruto responded before turning back around and going back to his noodles. Come on. You gotta teach me. Please. The boy pleaded as he stared up at the blonde. Nope. Only people I ever have to even offer to teach are Hinata-chan and Hanabi. The boy responded as made a shooing motion. Now, go away. I'm enjoying a meal with my team. You're just gonna send him away, Naruto-kun. Ino spoke up again as she finished a small mouthful of noodles. Not help him at all. Hey, he's already got himself an elite tutor. The boy snapped back. What the hell would he need me for? But, Ebisu is so boring. The boy whined pitifully. All he wants me to do is chakra basics and exercise. He doesn't teach me anything. Point monkey brat. Naruto shot back. How do you think I got as good as I am? I still do chakra exercises every day. He grumbled a bit before jerking his thumbs at each of the girls. I have the worst chakra control on my team, and I do more chakra training than the two of them both together. Hey, are you calling us lazy or something? Ino protested with a flash of anger across her eyes. No, I'm saying I have to work a lot more to learn chakra control at even a fraction of the pace you two do. The boy grunted, grumbling softly. Do you have any idea how boring hundreds of hours of tree climbing is? Well, you could always tell him what you do for your training these days, Naruto-kun. Hinata offered. Yeah, tell me. Konohamaru piped up excitedly while Naruto stared at her in horror. What? And have them after me for corrupting the Hokage's grandson. The blonde quickly shook his head. Plus, that's my workout. Come on. Tell me. The boy whined unhappily. I'll make you my boss. Nah. Sorry kid. I only accept pretty girls like these two. Naruto grinned as he gestured to his slightly blushing teammates. You pervert. The Hokage's grandson exclaimed with an accusatory point. The blonde paused a moment before he looked towards Hinata. Hinata-chan, am I a pervert? The girl twiddled her fingers a moment before nodding. Yes, you are Naruto-kun. Again, he paused a moment, before looking to the blonde girl. Ino-chan, am I a pervert? Definitely, the girl responded in all seriousness. See. Ha. Konohamaru crowed in triumph. Girls, should I stop being a pervert? Now the blonde smirked as he looked back at them. Hell no. The two proclaimed, before blushing brightly and looking down, fidgeting slightly. The younger boy could only stare in absolute disbelief. Wah. Huh. There are things a pervert will do, that women will definitely appreciate, Naruto responded with a laugh, as long as you're not a giggling, peeping, lecherous pervert. So, as long as you're not like Jiraiya-sama. The boy offered cautiously, as Hinata immediately paled and began to inch back on her seat, eyeing Naruto's back carefully. The boy in question merely stared down at the younger, before he spoke in a simple, concise manner. Do not mention that purveyor of filth and smut to me. His works should be burned as the menace upon society that they are. Naruto-kun. Gets a bit. Hinata paused a moment as she struggled to come up with the right words, emotional when his rival is mentioned. Come on. Naruto-kun's good, but he's not that good, Ino spoke up, not to compete with a Sanin. Oh, he doesn't have that kind of rivalry with him, Hinata quickly corrected. They're each other's main competition in their genre of novels. As the girl blushed wildly, Ino got a confused look on her face. Huh. Jiraiya. That bastard, writes the Ika Ika series. The boy growled out, it's all smut. There is no story, no elegance, no style. Just crass, crude, and base in both its and humor. Okay. Konohamaru began to slowly inch away from the group as he watched Hinata come up behind the boy and start stroking his hair. Shish. It's all right, Naruto-kun. The words were gentle, soft and silken as she whispered them upon his ear. The bad books are far, far away. Slowly the boy nodded, beginning to slowly calm himself down. At least, he was until Kakashi chose that moment to walk directly in front of him, nose buried in a copy of the series, giggling a perverse giggle. Immediately, Naruto twitched, then twitched again, before he threw his coat on and began to scream. Raagh. The anger burned in his voice as chains began to drop from the sleeves of his coat and whipped angrily towards Kakashi. Accursed Ika. Should we do something? Ino asked carefully as she watched Kakashi beginning to dodge the snake-like strikes of the chains, a sweat drop visible on the man's head. Yeah, run in the opposite direction. Konohamaru spoke up before running off. See ya. Coward. The blonde girl called back at the trailing cloud of dust. So, Hinata-chan. Read. The pale-eyed girl responded with a sage nod. Read. Blue eyes widened incredulously at the response. Naruto-kun's going berserk and you want us to read. Not just read. Hinata corrected before pulling out a pair of books with dark covers. Read these. Are those? Ino asked in hushed tones as she stared at the books. Yes, the collector's edition of Naruto-kun's latest books. The girl giggled happily. Gimme. Ino responded as she snatched one of the books from the girl and immediately got to work, staring at the page as a soft giggle began to waft through the air, soon accompanied by another from Hinata. Down the street, Naruto froze as a familiar sound reached his ears, causing the chains he was weaving to suddenly jerk erratically, managing to actually knock the book out of Kakashi's hands, author senses, tingling. As the boy immediately started to run back down the street, the silver-haired Kakashi could only stare, a slight sweat drop forming on his face. What the hell was that about? Back at the ramen shop, the two girls were avidly buried in their books, soft blushes on their cheeks as they couldn't help but giggle here and there. When Naruto zoomed back up to them, they didn't even bother looking up, waving to him at once before patting his seat again. However, just as he was about to take his seat, he felt Ino's hand, snaking out, squeezing firmly onto the boy's. Ooh, yes, Ino likes. The boy nervously chuckled as he scratched the back of his head, blushing slightly. My book, or my? Both. The answer came from both girls in stereo, before they both blushed brightly in response and giggled to one another. You definitely should take a squeeze, Hinata-chan, Ino piped up, so very nice. I couldn't. Not in public like this. The girl protested, though her eyes drifted down longingly towards the boy's rear. Bah, you know you want to. Ino declared as she grinned, reaching around, grabbing hold of Hinata's hand as she brought it up and pushed it against Naruto's with a wild grin. Ino. What are you doing? A new voice spoke up in stern disbelief from behind them. As Hinata reflexively squeezed down on Naruto's, as both girls eeped and looked up back into the street to see an older man with long blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, as his Junin vest was half hidden by a red, sleeveless coat. His blue eyes wide, Inoichi Yamanaka let his gaze wander from his daughter, to her hand, still atop Hinata's own as it was pressed against the butt of one of Konoha's more infamous citizens, to the boy himself, to the blushing Hyuga girl. Then, his gaze immediately turned back towards Ino. The girl in question paused a moment, before offering up, helping a teammate molest another teammate. Whatever answer he was expecting, that was obviously not it as the man's jaw slackened in amazement as he stared at his blushing daughter. What? I'm pretty sure I didn't stutter. The blonde girl responded before looking over at Hinata. No offense, Hinata-chan. None taken, Ino-chan. The girl responded, blushing bright crimson as she continued to knead Naruto's through his coat. That's nice and all. The boy spoke up, but maybe you should take your hands off my. Yes, please. The older man on the street stressed as he would twitch slightly. That would be most appreciated. Both girls reluctantly withdrew their hands, their faces flushed and crimson as they couldn't quite bring themselves to meet Inoichi's gaze. Sorry. Now, would someone please tell me what's going on? The man stressed, his eye twitching visibly now. We passed our genin test and Naruto-kun took us to lunch. Ino offered with a slight grin on her face. Naruto himself had taken his seat, pulling his second bowl of ramen into his hands, and eating away as he leaned back against the counter, watching the scene before him carefully. I see, the man responded, and exactly, how did this lead to the scene I just came across? Well, you see, it's rather complicated, the blonde girl offered lamely. A masked Junin with silver hair walked past us, reading a certain orange book Naruto-kun really doesn't like. Hinata spoke up. Naruto-kun chased after him for a bit, then we admiring him for his reasons. Kakashi, the older blonde man twitched slightly again as he looked at the girls, and tell me then, how did this lead to you groping his? Ino-chan insisted. The Hyuga girl blushed crimson as her hand reflexively twitched, as if holding the flesh in its grip once more as she felt a slight trickle of blood flow out of her nose. Wincing Ino grumbled softly, thanks Hinata-chan. All right. Moving past the squeezing, Inoichi paused a moment before giving his daughter a meaningful glare, for now. I'm going to guess that there isn't an Ino Shika-cho team then. Ino winced at her father's words before slowly nodding. Yeah, Shikamaru and Choji are on team 8 with forehead. All right, then, the man spoke up as he looked carefully to the boy and girl sitting next to his daughter. My name is Inoichi Yamanaka, Ino's father and a member of the Anbu interrogation squad. Nice to meet ya. Naruto responded with a grin, completely unfazed as the man took special care to stress his occupation. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, official performance reviewer of Konoha Shinobi, capture specialist, and member of Team 10. Official performance reviewer. There was a raised brow at that comment. Oh yes, after the report I filed concerning the ANBU's performance on my last prank, the Hokage thought it would be useful for me to begin to periodically review the performances of various Konoha Shinobi. At my discretion, of course, the boy responded happily. He thought my first report was very informative. Quote. Inoichi stared at the boy for a long moment, twitching for a moment. Would you be implying something, kid? Only that I'm very protective of my team, the boy responded as he looked back into the man's eyes, and that I've been taking on Junin and Anbu for a few years now. The intimidation act doesn't work on me. Right, kid? The man responded, slightly speculative. Ask Ibiki about the rubber chicken, the boy responded simply. Quote. Right. Inoichi only shook his head with a slight sigh before he turned to look at the blushing Hyuga girl. And, I do believe you're Hiyashi's daughter, Hinata, correct? Why yes sir. The girl nodded with a blush as she clung to Naruto's side. So then, who's your sensei? The man asked curiously, as he idly twitched at how Naruto continued to carelessly devour his ramen. Kurenai Yuhi and Anko Mitarashi, Ino spoke up cheerfully. Quote. Inoichi stared at his daughter for a long moment. Please tell me you're joking. Nope. Naruto spoke up. Anko-chan listened to Ruka-sensei talk about how much he enjoyed teaching so much, that she decided to give it a try, and since we're designed to be a capture and retrieval squad. We got lucky. Inoichi stared at the beaming face of the boy, and twitched once more. Lucky, right? You don't know Mitarashi very well then. Actually I know Anko-chan very well, the boy responded as he suddenly hardened his gaze, including all the BS she still has to go through because of the snake. Right. Okay then. The look in the boy's eyes was slightly unnerving how quickly it changed as soon as he perceived a slight against one of his friends. Okay then. I only have one question. Yes, Inoichi-san. The boy spoke up. The man pointed towards Hinata before asking, does your father know you're groping boys at ramen stands? The academy. Team 7. Kakashi Hakat spoke up as he entered the room, grumbling a bit as he shook his hand lightly. You're late. A voice screamed out while a pair of quite annoyed grunts could be heard following it. Sorry, I was attacked by a crazy chain-wielding author at the ramen stand down the street for. Liar. But I was. He knocked away my precious before being called away by his fans. Liar. My first impression is. Kakashi twitched before glaring at them with a single eye. I hate you all. Inoichi Yamanaka to see Hiyashi, Ino's father said simply to the pale-eyed guard at the gate as he would lightly cross his arms about his chest. Ah, do you have an appointment with Hiyashi-sama? The man responded simply as he gave the man a stiff bow. No, the man responded, tell him I'm here to speak to him, in regards to our daughters. Ah, the man spoke up again, am I to assume you refer to Hinata-sama? There was a slight contempt thrown against the girl's name as he would stand neutrally before the man. Yes, now, if you would be so kind as to let him know I'm here. There was no question in those words, the man's blue eyes, suddenly hard as they bore down into the pale eyes of the man before him. Ah, of course, again the man responded, a nod of his head, before he turned and slipped into the compound. Inoichi twitched slightly as he watched the man go, the controlled contempt he'd shown of his own clan's heir, and his daughter's teammate. For a moment, he couldn't help but wonder how far had their village fallen. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, he waited, patiently, where he was, until the man finally returned, giving Inoichi a deeper bow this time. Ah, please follow me Yamanaka-sama, the man said quietly, slightly cowed for the moment for some reason before turning and leading him into the man building. The blond man merely nodded his head in silence, saying nothing as he would move through the pristine and immaculate halls of the compound, his arms still crossed until he was brought to the office of the waiting Hiyashi. The stern face of the dark-haired man nodded to Inoichi's escort in dismissal before he gestured to the seat in front of his desk. What can I do for you today, Inoichi-san? I came across an interesting scene today, Hiyashi. There was an almost casual ease to the man's words, as he purposely left off any honorifics. It would seem that team selections didn't go quite as I had imagined they would. Oh, the dark-haired man responded as he looked down at some papers before him, idly scanning through them. I am to imagine then, that your daughter is on a team with my own and Naruto then. Ah, I see you've already been informed of the teams then. The blond man shifted slightly, a look of annoyance flashing across his eyes. No, I merely know Naruto. There was a faint smile on Hiyashi's face as he gently set aside his paperwork. I highly doubt he wouldn't have taken steps to ensure that he and my daughter were on the same team, considering how he purposely failed his previous examinations solely for that purpose. Inoichi twitched slightly as he heard the response. I see. The boy is very driven, Hiyashi allowed, a rueful smile on his face as he would lightly lean back. When he has a goal, to be an obstacle to it, is not something that's generally pleasant. First-hand experience. The response was dry as the blond man merely arched a brow up. Hiyashi chuckled softly at the man's words before nodding gently. Yes, years of it. The man paused then, allowing a slight, wistful smile to cross his features. The boy was my wife's student after all. Ino's father froze softly in place, the color slowly draining from his face as he looked into Hiyashi's amused eyes. You mean, he practices that style? I would have thought his profile to have been required reading for all upper-level ninja by now. Hiyashi chuckled just a bit, considering his tendencies in how he trains himself. I find myself suddenly very worried about my daughter. Inoichi grumbled softly as he leaned back in his chair, his eyes darkening slightly. Oh, Hiyashi shrugged slightly. Despite how he seems, Naruto is a good person. He's been willing to protect my daughters with his life since he was a child. The man paused, his eyes darkening a moment as he took a deep breath, calming himself before continuing. During the incident with Kumo, Naruto was almost mortally wounded. Stalling the man, Hiyashi took a slow, deep breath at that. I still don't know how he survived, the blood loss alone. Inoichi was silent. He could remember the incident which cost Hiyashi his twin, watching the man before him. As the dark-haired man continued, he was still conscious, somehow. When I brought Hinata back, the boy actually managed to smile when he saw she was safe. He simply refused to die. The man shook his head, before chuckling just a bit, and after it was all over, he refused to let me go. Hiyashi looked up then, his eyes locking onto Inoichi. The boy saved me from myself. If he hadn't been there, he shook his head softly. I don't want to think of what I would have done. He sounds like an amazing child, Inoichi responded softly, before he looked up into Hiyashi's eyes. That doesn't change the fact though, that I came across them at a ramen shop, with my daughter putting your daughter's hand on the boy's and getting her to squeeze. The dark-haired man twitched slightly, before putting his face lightly against his palm. So, you're worried about your daughter corrupting mine? Wah. Well, the blond man froze slightly before twitching, nervously. I don't want anyone's daughters to get corrupted. Well, as it is. Hiyashi shifted a bit uncomfortably. My daughter does tend to take after me. Meaning. There was a sharp look in Inoichi's eyes as he looked back at Hiyashi. Well, the man coughed slightly, his reserved face coloring slightly. You do recall what I was like at that age, don't you? Huh. The man considered for a moment as he thought back. You were always the quiet one, as I recall. Didn't you faint the first couple of times your wife flirted with you? The flush on the man's face only grew as he gave a slow, pained nod. Ah, yes. I had forgotten that. The look turned sour. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, yeah. The man waved his hand. Though, it was funny when she started leading you around on a leash after a while. The dark-haired man twitched again before burying his face in his hands and shifting slightly, to keep himself comfortable. Ah yes. Like I said, she takes after her father, instead of her mother. So, what are you saying, Hiyashi? The blonde man sighed, eyeing the man across from him. Both our daughters are perverts. The man shrugged slightly. Learn to live with it. Learn to live with it. The man glared back at Hiyashi. She's my baby. My princess. Who was publicly putting another girl's hand on a guy's, probably getting a feel for it herself. The pale-eyed man shot back. And if you think women can't be perverted. The man chuckled softly as he looked back at Inoichi. Need I remind you of both our wives? Inoichi paled again, the color simply draining from his face as his eyes grew wide. Oh God. Indeed. Hiyashi nodded back, before reaching into his desk, pulling out a bottle of sake and a pair of dishes. Drink. Bar. The man responded back. I think I'm going to need a lot more than just that. Yes, I think we both might. Hiyashi nodded back, before a simple, sadistic grin slipped across his face, as he rose up. Oh, by the way, did you happen to see any books with the girls? Huh. The man paused, before blinking as he thought back. Yeah, they each had a dark-covered book with them, that they'd been reading, I think. Why? Oh, Inoichi, my friend. Hiyashi walked around, slinging an arm about the man's shoulder. Welcome to my hell. And with that, he deposited one of those books into the blonde man's hand. My daughter's favorite series, and I'm going to guess, soon to be your daughter's as well. Cautiously, the man opened up the book, before his eyes widened even more, a slight whimper breaking through his lips. Oh, gods. Yes, indeed, Hiyashi nodded sagely. Shall we go get those drinks then? Yes, we shall. The man nodded quickly, his eyes still glued to the pages before him. We most definitely shall. And with that, the two stood up, and made a beeline through the compound, straight to the nearest bar they could find. Back at Ichiraku Ramen. Did you guys just get a chill running down your spine? Naruto spoke up, looking from one girl to the other. Ino looked up from where her nose was still buried in her book, her face flushed slightly. Nope, not me, Naruto-kun. And not me either, Naruto-kun, Hinata responded, letting off a soft little giggle as she stared at the pages in front of her. Huh, it was as if someone was trying to warn me about something. The boy paused a moment, considering. Ah well. So, you girls still up for that prank? Ino instantly broke into a downright evil grin as she nodded, eagerly, before quickly getting up and grabbing Hinata. In fact, we're going to go get started on it right now. But. The dark-haired girl protested. Naruto-kun. Book. Cuddles. Ino leaned in, and suddenly whispered something into Hinata's ear. The girl instantly flushed crimson, a spot of blood appearing beneath her nose as she bursted into a string of perverted little giggles. Why didn't you say so, Ino-chan? See you soon, Naruto-kun. Instantly, both girls were zooming down the street, giggling madly to one another as they whispered plans and thoughts one to the other. Back at the ramen shop, Naruto stared after them, before turning to the owner. Why do I get the feeling I should be worried? Oh, you should be, Chuki agreed with a smile and a twinkling wink, but, in a good way. I'm in for a ride, aren't I? Of your life, kid, of your life. The next morning, training ground 13. Naruto lounged back up against a tree, a slight yawn escaping his lips as he half dozed off. His forehead protector was pulled low, covering his eyes as the early morning sun glinted across the etched metal. The boy looked to be in an idyllic repose, peaceful and quiet. And as it so happened to be, the first thing Anko saw when she arrived at the training grounds. Her eyes growing wide with mischief, she slowly began to creep towards the boy in exaggerated fashion, moving on the tips of her toes as her body hunched forward. Just as she loomed over the boy, she took a slow, deep breath, then suddenly, practically screamed out, Boo. The figure she loomed over suddenly exploded in coils of ensnaring rope as in twice in as many days. Anko fell victim to the boy's exploding rope clone technique. MMMPH. MPH. The woman attempted to scream as she wiggled about, struggling against her bonds as she heard a voice from above. Morning Anko-chan. That wasn't very nice of you. Naruto grinned down at her. Plus, did you really think I'd just be napping in plain sight on my own? MPH. The woman grunted softly as she glared sulkily up at him. I wonder. The boy paused a moment, putting his finger to his lip in thought. I wonder how Iruka-sensei would like to have you be the one tied up and helpless for a change. A slight trickle of blood pouring past the spiky-haired woman's nose as she flushed even more, her eyes glazing over was the boy's only response. And, of course, she likes that idea. Blue eyes sparkled as the boy shook his head. Why am I not surprised? Chuckling softly, the boy shook his head before shifting just a bit as he got more comfortable on his tree limb and looked out over the wooded area of their training ground. He'd gotten up early, again today, though, and made his way back to the training ground. After a decent warm-up, he lounged back, just enjoying a bit of rest as he waited for the rest of the team and his teachers to show a rope. As boredom began to arise, the boy dropped one arm, letting it hand loose at his side while a length of rope began to slither down, moving down the tree with its knotted tip before beginning to crawl over to Anko. The woman in question began to worry, when the rope began to wind itself against her chest. Slowly, ever so slowly it tightened, by the rope tied itself into a knot, securing itself about her torso, before she could only watch in fear as the boy waggled his brows, holding up the other end of the rope from his tree branch. The woman began to squirm, trying to work out of the ropes just as she saw the boy simply jump off the branch. Immediately her body was jerked up, almost flying into the air as the body pulled her up, her body soon dangling in midair as he smiled, carefully tying off his end of the rope as he left Anko to dangle from the tree. Now Anko-chan, what have you learned from this experience? MMPH. The woman growled as she struggled to speak through the ropes gagging her. Pulling out his notebook, he idly began to scribble away. Ya know, stab first, isn't the kind of response that's going to make me want to let you down any sooner. The woman glared back at him as he would grin up at her for a moment, before suddenly cackling like mad as he furiously wrote in his notebook, oh yes, that works PEERFECTLY. Anko couldn't help but feel the trickle of cold sweat running down the side of her face at the boy's words, a tremor of fear running through her body as she stared down at the boy with wide eyes. Pausing a moment, the boy looked back up at the woman and began to stroke against his chin. I could always use some more of those tags. Her eyes almost bugged out of her skull at the boy's words, a slow whimper of fear beginning to escape her lips, before she heard his next words, I wonder if Iruka-sensei would like some. Anko's head almost flew off as she nodded, sending her body swaying about on the tree branch as she couldn't help but giggle into her gag. As if seeing her reaction, the boy grinned to himself, perhaps I should give him a nice instructional guide I wonder. Some nice ways to tie up his girl. He paused, ignoring the growing trickle of blood coming from Anko's nose. Perhaps advice on which toys to use. The boy paused and grins. How many hours to keep up the teasing? A nice progression chart to give him extra ideas on how to move from one to the other. And keep his girl boiling him. The woman was sweating now, her eyes glazed over as she couldn't help but shiver in delight at the possibilities. Are you having fun, Naruto? A new voice asked as Kurenai casually walked onto the field, eyeing the pair. Oh, definitely Kurenai-sensei, the boy responded. If you'd have given me a few more minutes, I would have had Anko-chan properly marinated and half-cooked. So I can see, the woman responded dryly as she looked up at her friend, whose face was flushed positively crimson while she dangled in midair. And why is Anko tied up this time? She thought I was lying down against the tree taking a nap, the boy responded simply. So, she thought she'd come over and wake me up. Ah, I see, the woman nodded. Another of those exploding rope clones of yours. What can I say? The boy shrugged before grinning. I love that technique. That's become rather obvious, I think. The red-eyed woman chuckled. So, how much longer you intend to leave her hanging like that? I dunno. The boy paused, before looking at her hopefully. The rest of the day. MMPH. Came the muffled protest overhead. While it is tempting, the woman admitted as she smiled up at her friend, I do need her to come with me later on to turn in our report that you three passed. The boy pondered, I'll let her out at the end of practice. Well, I don't exactly need her help to start you three off, the woman considered, lightly tapping her finger against her lip. The angry protests resumed as Anko struggled valiantly against the ropes. The boy said thoughtfully, well, is Aruka-sensei working today? The woman overhead let out a speculative sound. I don't know, think she'd be interested. Kurenai responded. How do you think I was cooking her? The boy responded with that wide, almost innocent grin. There was an indignant sound above them, while Anko flushed a startling crimson. So, the next time she's being, well, Anko, I could just tie her up, and dump her off with her boyfriend. Anko mulled that one over, visibly, considering the pros and cons as Naruto countered. Depends. You want to encourage or discourage her? The blonde shot back. Good point. The woman almost giggled. Sorry Anko, no delivering you to your Aruka-kun unless you're on your best behavior. MMPH. The woman grunted in annoyance. If you're really good, we'll do it with ribbon and a nice bow, sound fair? Naruto offered. There was another speculative look in Anko's eyes as she dangled where she did. Yeah, thought so. The boy laughed softly before looking at Kurenai. I'll get her down with the girls get here. That'll work. Kurenai smiled and nodded before she pulled out the book from yesterday and buried her nose in it, beginning to giggle softly at it. You're not going to be reading that when you're supposed to be training us, right? Naruto said worriedly. Oh, of course not. She paused a moment. But, it is a very good book. You're a talented writer. Thanks. Nice to be appreciated. The boy grinned softly. Tell you what, make sure to give us your full attention for the training and I'll give you the rest of the series. The rest of the series. The woman quirked a brow, an intrigued look in her eyes. I can write very fast, the boy grinned, though, these days, with shadow clones. The boy just grinned. They're great for taking care of stuff like that, cleaning, writing, observing. Try using them for chakra training, the woman suggested casually as she glanced back at her book, since you retain their memories. The rest left unsaid. The boy's eyes widened before he grinned, broadly. Kurenai-sensei, I could kiss you. Hey. A pair of outraged voices sounded from the distance as Hinata and Ino came storming into view. Oh. Hey girls. Naruto waved casually as he yawned. Wanna play some whack the Anko pinata? MMMPH. The Junin suspended practically screeched against the gag as she squirmed and wiggled wildly. I think all you'd get out of her are condoms and kunai, Kurenai commented dryly, no offense Anko. MPH, the woman above them grunted. Never mind that. Ino quickly interrupted. What's this about kissing Kurenai-sensei? Hinata practically screeched, her eyes ablaze as she stared at the boy. Oh, she just gave me a really awesome training idea. The boy responded cheekily, before pausing, as he grinned at the pair. What, did you two want those kisses for yourselves? Instantly the pair of girls' anger was washed away in a flush of embarrassment as they couldn't quite bring themselves to meet his gaze. Ino grumbled slightly as she stepped forward, her hands on her hips, her voice low and warning, Naruto-kun. Yes, Ino-chan. The boy asked guilelessly as he blinked those brilliant blue eyes at her. Quote. You're doing that on purpose, the blonde girl pouted as she half glared at him. Doing what on purpose, Ino-chan? Those eyes, sparkling even more as he would put his notebook away, before he walked over to her, his fingers reaching out, a brush against her flushed cheek as he lightly leaned in, whispering against her ear, making you weak in the knees. Yes, the girl hissed out, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment, almost sinking into his words before she shook herself, trying to force a glare into her eyes, I mean. He laughed, as he pulled away, moving over to Hinata to wrap her up in a warm hug. Good morning Hinata-chan. Good morning Naruto-kun. The girl smiled as she bowed her head happily, flushing slightly as she eagerly pressed herself back into his hug. Did you two have a good night? The boy smiled as he slipped around, coming up behind both of them, his arms, gently settling on the smalls of their backs. Well, up until Dad came in drunk off his, mumbling something about me taking after Mom, Ino grumbled as she leaned against the boy's chest, not seeing the bug-eyed look crossing both Kurenai and Anko's faces, but, funny thing was, he didn't do it with Shikaku or Shuza. Huh. Hinata blinked slightly as she snuggled into Naruto's side herself. Father also came in rather inebriated last night. I don't think I've ever heard of him going out and drinking before, and he was speaking something about his daughters taking after him. Snickering giggles could be heard coming from the two instructors as the trio turned and looked towards their widely grinning teachers. Blinking slightly, Naruto stared at the two women. What's so funny? MMPHM. Anko spoke up through her gagged mouth, her eyebrows waggling suggestively. Okay, why is Anko-sensei tied up again? Ino asked as she looked up at the spiky-haired woman. Oh, we thought we'd start off the day with a game of Whack the Anko Pinata. Naruto spoke up cheerily, good way to get the blood flowing. Naruto-kun, Hinata blinked owlishly, you don't mean that, do you? Meh, well, not really, the boy admitted sheepishly. Oh, the girl responded with a look of disappointment on her face. Anko twitched visibly as she saw the disappointment in the girl's eyes, glaring balefully back at the group. Can I use her for practicing my gentle fist then, Kurenai-sensei? The Hyuga spoke up, bright-eyed and eager as she smiled at the red-eyed woman. Well, the woman reached up, cupping her chin thoughtfully as she looked back at her friend. It does work best against a living practice dummy. Anko whimpered audibly as she struggled once more against the ropes. Hey, the boy grinned, poor Anko-chan. But, I think the girls were asking you two a question. Instantly Kurenai froze as she shifted nervously. Oh, it's nothing much at all. Huh. Ino narrowed her eyes. He crossed her hands about her chest. Start talking. I am rather curious myself, Hinata added as she looked skeptically at the women as she arched an elegant brow upwards. Well, you see. Kurenai paused before grinning. Ask Anko, she knows more about than me. Naruto looked at the twitching of the girls next to him before carefully looking back to the now visibly sweating Anko. You two wouldn't be about to say something like their mothers being the two most perverted kunoichi of their day. Both girls blinked a moment, before suddenly turning incredulous looks onto their teammate. What? The boy shrugged slightly with a grin. I know for a fact Hinata-chan's mother was Naruto-kun. Hinata blushed a violent crimson as she eeped softly, her eyes turning away as she couldn't help but shiver slightly at the thought. Hey, she was my sensei, remember? The boy grinned happily as he would lean down, kissing lightly on Hinata's neck, and, you never complained before. Eee. The girl squealed happily before immediately taking a death grip on his arm, snuggling against him with everything she had. Naruto-kun. Okay. Ino slowly drawled out, blinking a bit at the girl's reaction, before twitching slightly. So, Naruto-kun. The girl grinned wickedly as she leaned in, lightly breathing against his neck. Are you saying I'm a pervert? The boy paused, considering as he looked down at the woman smiling a predator's grin back at him, before leaning in, suddenly at her neck as he dragged his teeth against her soft skin. Yes. The girl shivered, a slight whimper escaping her lips before twitching and curling against him even tighter. Mean. Anko. Kurenai spoke up carefully as she looked at her tied-up friend. The woman in question responded curiously. How wrong is it to be jealous of your genin? The red-eyed kunoichi twitched slightly. Anko shrugged back at her, before leering at the floor show once more. Me either. The woman sighed. All right, playtime's over, get Anko down so we can start training. Ino and Hinata both pouted as they snuggled tightly against Naruto's side, but we wanna plaaaaaaay. Naruto himself couldn't help but sweat drop slightly at the girls, before chuckling nervously towards the Junins. Hey, this could take a sec. Both women could feel the drops of sweat slowly rolling along the sides of their faces as the two girls giggled happily. Later, the Hokage's office. Well, which genin teams are going to be in rotation this time? Sarutobi spoke up with a smile. Team 7 passes. There was a hint of resignation in his voice as Kakashi stuck his nose in his book, barely. Team 8 passes. Asuma spoke up with a grin, though, I pity the guys. And Team 10. The Hokage spoke up, directing his gaze towards where Kurenai and Anko had their noses buried in books, before coughing softly. Kurenai, Anko. Did you say something? Both girls looked up as they spoke simultaneously, while their faces held a slight flush. Team 10, did they pass? The group of Junin could feel a drop of sweat each falling down the sides of their heads. Oh, I don't know Anko-chan, what do you think? Kurenai turned her head, looking at her partner. Do you think they pass? I'm not sure, Nai-chan, they were awfully rough. The woman pouted softly. I still feel all stiff and sore, it's so hard to walk. I know, you poor baby, the woman nodded, patting her on the shoulder. The way they all ganged up on you, tying you down, doing all those horrible things to you. Anko sniffled audibly as she leaned back against her friend, and the things they promised to do to me. All those horrible things. And the worst part of it all. Yes, I know, I know. The woman patted consolingly on her friend's shoulder. The worst part of all. Asuma spoke up, a slightly twitching look to his face. They wouldn't follow through and do it. Anko turned her head and cried, directly onto Kurenai's bosom as she clutched her friend tightly, getting me all worked up and eager to go, then not following through. It was horrible. There, the red-eyed woman soothed. I'm sure next time Naruto will be happy to tie you up with a ribbon on Aruka's bed. You think so, Nai-chan? The woman spoke up, her eyes suddenly sparkling with delight. You really think so? Yes, I'm sure, she responded back. In between the girls driving their fathers to drinking, I'm certain they'll be happy to serve you up to Aruka. She paused a moment, before grinning. And remember, Naruto promised to sit down and have the talk with poor Aruka. The Chunin in question gulped audibly as he shrank slightly from his position next to the Hokage's desk, not daring to meet the incredulous and more than a few jealous stares directed at him. Coughing next to the man, the Hokage himself spoke up. So then, I'll assume that Naruto and his team passed. Oh, do they? Kurenai and Anko responded, a glazed look in their eyes, his books alone. In unison, they sighed happily before instantly their noses returned to the books in question, quiet, perverted giggles rising up from between them. Sarutobi chuckled a bit at the woman's antics as he would continue, their skills, their teamwork. Hey, was there ever any doubt? Anko chuckled softly, you know how good the brat is. He and Hinata work very well together already. Kurenai grinned, before blushing softly, very well. A wide grin curled across the woman's face. Anko giggled softly as she continued, and Ino's already showing signs at fitting almost perfectly in with them. Hell, they even took it into their own hands to dole out punishment amongst themselves. The woman pouted softly, just because they didn't think I'd be appropriate in how I would punish Ino for calling me names. Wheel. Kurenai was grinning softly. I think she was giving a rather accurate description of how you were acting with your boyfriend. In front of all those innocent genin too. Aruka was blushing again as he tried to shrink down into nothing in his chair, hiding from the gazes sent his way as Anko pouted back, but he's so cute. Everyone was simply staring at the two, playful, giggling kunoichi as they bantered back and forth at a loss for what to say. At least, everyone save a chuckling old man. Ah, welcome to the Naruto effect. Oh, that reminds me, old man. Anko piped up. Naruto wanted to know if he was able to give those performance reviews to other genin teams. I don't see why not. The man smiled back at her, though the pay grade will of course be lower, how much so dependent on if the team's Junin instructors are involved or not. The Junin instructors in the room could feel a cold shiver running down their spines as they stared from the innocent smile on the Hokage's face, to the cheerful grin on Anko's as she continued, good to know. Though, since he's now in a team, will you allow his teammates to take part in these missions? So long as they contribute to the final report, I don't see why not. Hey. Anko was giggling now, her eyes blazing. This is gonna be so much fun. I can't believe I didn't give this a try sooner. Hokage-sama, Kakashi spoke up, carefully as he eyed the woman. Why do you hate us? Why, Kakashi? Whatever gave you that idea? The old man smiled back at the silver-haired Junin. Think of all the extra training that your students will get from this. I was attacked in the middle of the street by one of their students. The man protested, in broad daylight. You were walking down the street reading Ika, Kurenai deadpanned, reading that filth, where children can see. Really? He made me late for meeting my team. Don't you usually get lost on the road of life anyway? Anko countered sarcastically. Well, yes, but that's besides the point. And you're telling us that a Junin like you couldn't handle a newly genin. Kurenai teased, maybe you're one of the ones that needs the first performance review. Why Nai-chan? I think that's a great idea. Anko agreed, her eyes sparkling. We'll have to talk to Naruto about it straight away. I do believe you're right, Anko-chan. The woman nodded happily back to her, especially considering his thoughts on Ika Ika. Leave my Ika Ika out of it. Kakashi cried fearfully, clutching the orange book to his chest. It's done nothing to you. To us. Nope. Not at all. Anko grinned, to Naruto. Now that's a different story, entirely. All I have to say is, this is going to be an interesting year. Kurenai grinned before looking back into her book and just giggling once more. Yes, I do believe it is, the Hokage agreed, his smile visible on his face. I do believe it is. Yamanaka household. Hey daddy, Ino called happily, a broad grin written across her face as she practically skipped into their home, despite the almost ruined state of her clothes. She was covered in dust and dirt from head to toe, tears all along the fabrics of her outfit, with stains of all kinds splattered across it. Cuts and scrapes, with flecks of dried blood popped up here and there, crisscrossing her body as her hair clung matted and knotted to her skin. But still, it did nothing to dim the triumphant smile written happily on her face. Inoichi himself simply stared back at her from his seat in the kitchen, unable to quite comprehend how his daughter, his princess, always so concerned about her appearance, seemed to be reveling in the clinging signs of exertion. My, you seem happy today. Something happened I should know about. We had our first training session. The girl almost giggled as she got into a chair across from him and practically melted into it. Ah, I see. The man frowned slightly before canting his head lightly to the side. And that's why you don't care about your clothes being how they are. The girl paused a moment, struggling against herself, before slowly shaking her head. I actually don't. It's weird, but I'm happier about having a really productive training session than I'm upset about ruining my clothes. Sounds like my little princess is actually turning into a kunoichi. The man smiled back at her as he watched how she thoughtfully nodded her head. Yeah, thanks to my team. The girl grinned happily. I don't know what I would have done if I'd been stuck with Choji and Shikamaru. They don't do anything. I take it that Naruto and Hinata are different. The man smiled as he carefully sipped at his tea. Oh yeah, a lot different. The girl nodded happily. They actually like to train, and they keep pushing each other, and me. They encourage each other to try harder. And Naruto, he's just amazing what he can do. So Here, the man smiled slightly again as he took another sip from his tea. So what are you going to do tonight, princess? Oh, gonna get cleaned up. Then Hinata and I are going to help Naruto mess with the guys, the girl said nonchalantly. How about you? Going drinking with Hinata's dad again. Inoichi almost spit out his tea at that, before calming himself quickly as he gave her a sheepish look. Oh, figured it out, huh? Really, dad? The girl rolled her eyes with a grin. We are teammates, you know. She giggled softly. It wasn't too hard to figure out when we realized you two were blubbering about the same thing when you came home last night. I don't quite remember that honestly, the man responded sheepishly as he watched his daughter stand up, then saunter towards the bathroom. Oh, you didn't say too much. The girl grinned back over her shoulder, just about how I was taking after mom so much. The man froze, paling slightly as he managed to clear his throat with a nod. Ah, I see. Just before she vanished into the bath, she cast him one last look, with a devilish grin, of course. From what my instructors told me, I really am. A perverted and hauntingly familiar giggle filled the air as Inoichi only paled even further as he watched his daughter vanish behind the door. A shiver ran down his spine, as he was inflicted with a sense of icy dread only fathers could feel concerning their daughters. This was very bad. Hyuga compound. Did you have a good day, Hinata? Hiyashi asked as he sensed his daughter walking past the door of his office, sipping lightly at his tea as he went over a scroll. Why, yes, father. The girl responded with a panting little blush as she offered a slight smile, her condition much the same as her teammates had been, and yours. Well enough. Well enough. The man paused a moment, though I did receive a few rather alarming requests to intercede with young Naruto concerning his new appointment by the Hokage. Did your hangover give you any troubles? The girl asked, that smile on her lips quite innocent as she smiled at her father. Ah, The man coughed uncomfortably as he shifted uneasily on his chair. I take it that you were aware of my escapade last night. You woke me up when you came home. The girl giggled softly. I haven't heard you singing that much since, in quite a while. She ended her sentence softly, a distant look in her eyes before she smiled softly, and you made some very interesting comments. Ah, the man twitched again, shifting even more uncomfortably in his seat. I'm afraid I don't quite recollect. Oh, it's nothing much, father. The girl smiled. Apparently you and Yamanaka-san were having quite the time talking about daughters taking after their mothers. The man slowly paled, gulping audibly as he would neutrally respond. I see. And how did you know I was out with Yamanaka-san? Oh, Ino-chan and I had a nice talk about it. Along with Kurenai-sensei and Anko-sensei. The girl spoke up cheerfully, though, they were saying something about how I took after both my parents. Yes, I will agree with that. The Hyuga clan head was actually blushing at his daughter's words as he refused to look up at her. Well, I'm going to take a bath and get cleaned up, father. Hinata spoke up cheerfully. Then I'm going to go have some fun with Ino-chan and Naruto-kun. I see. The man nodded. Very good. Oh, and father. Her voice was heard down the hall. You should go out more often. Especially if it gets you singing again. The man twitched slightly as he put his head into his hands, shaking softly as he blushed as brightly as he daughter could. I'm going out. Ino called out, grinning back at her father as she stood in an all-concealing raincoat as she smiled cheekily at her father, a touch of makeup on her face. Hold it. Inoichi frowned as he looked at his daughter, watching her as she froze, those blue eyes of his narrowing slowly. Turn around. Yes, daddy. The girl smiled innocently as she looked back at her father, batting her own blue eyes back at him. What's with the coat? His arms were crossing his chest now, a warning tone slipping into his voice. Now, daddy, don't you trust me? The girl smiled back at him. What's with the coat? The man repeated, his eyes narrowing even more. Are you really sure you want to know, daddy? The girl grinned back at him, her eyes filled with a mischievous delight, and think very carefully on that. The man opened his mouth to say, yes, he sure as he did want to know what she had on under there, before a growing pit in the middle of his stomach spoke its own mind. Princess. I'm a kunoichi of the leaf now, daddy. The girl spoke up casually, and you know what that can entail. The man flinched back at those words, images coming unbidden to his mind that he really didn't want to think about. Ino. Besides, I think you can get a pretty good idea of just what I might have under here if you think about it. The girl smirked casually back at her father. I told you, Hinata-chan and I are going to do something to mess with the rest of our genin class. If they thought they were jealous of him before. Inoichi could only stare as his daughter let off a giggle that bordered somewhere between perverted and maniacal. Just be safe then. All right. Of course. The girl rolled her eyes. I'm gonna have Hinata-chan and Naruto-kun with me. It's not like we're gonna have. The girl paused then, her thoughts trailing off as a small leer appeared on her face along with a small trickle of blood, though. Enough. There was a look of helplessness and anger on the man's face as he waved his hands violently across his face. No more. Please, no more. Well, I did warn you, daddy. Ino smiled back at her father. Have a good night. And with that, Inoichi Yamanaka watched as his daughter slipped out of their house to enjoy the rest of her afternoon, leaving her father to groan softly in their house. I need a drink. Hyuga compound. Hinata-sama. The pale eyes of Neji Hyuga watched as his cousin was discreetly taking her leave from the compound, brow furrowing just slightly at her appearance, dressed in nothing more than an oversized raincoat and a pair of boots. Why yes, Neji. The girl spoke up, almost timidly as she looked up at her cousin's eyes. Was that makeup he could see on her face? Where are you going? The words were cold and clipped as he spoke, staring hard at her. Out. The words were said, simply and firmly as there was a sudden fire of defiance in her eyes. And what are you wearing? The boy frostily replied. The girl grinned back at him with a soft blush on her cheeks. Clothes. Hinata-sama. The boy glared back at her. Go away, Neji. The girl responded before she turned and continued on her way back down the street. Or, at least she tried to until she could feel her cousin's hand, gripping on her arm. Hinata-sama, you should remember your place in our clan. It would not do to have the clan heiress wandering around like a common The girl shook her arm free as she interrupted the boy, her eyes suddenly frigidly cold as she glared back at him. Neji-san, I am going to say this once more. Go away. Hinata-sama. He hissed the last part of words like an insult as he would grab once more upon her coat. You will come with me to see your father. Now. No. As a matter of fact I won't. There was anger there now, pure and bubbling beneath her eyes as she would almost growl back at him. I am going out, with my teammates, and you will release me now. The growing venom in her words startled the boy enough to relax his grip on her as she pulled away, a growl now audible from her throat as she began to stalk away from the boy. The boy himself chose instead to grab hold of her coat once more, and this time, when he pulled back, he dislodged the loose tie that held it closed. What he saw sent a flush of embarrassment through his face, as a flush of anger through the girl. You bastard. Even as a bead of blood began to dribble past the boy's nose, the girl's scream erupted against his eardrums, before he felt a sudden, excruciating pain ripping through his body. A pain courtesy of Hinata's boot lodging itself firmly up between his legs. As the boy whimpered softly in pain, he collapsed backwards as Hinata quickly pulled her coat back over herself, tying it tightly as she fought down a shudder, glaring at her cousin. I take it. There's a reason for this, daughter. Hiyashi spoke up, his face clearly caught between relief and worry as he looked down at the whimpering, prone form of his nephew. I told him I was going out. Anger was still burning through those pale eyes as she spoke. Neji took it upon himself to intervene, and decided it was his right to interject himself into my affairs. I refused his words. He grabbed me, twice, and when he attempted a third time, he ripped open my coat. She locked her eyes dangerously onto her father, forcing me to reprimand him in an appropriate manner. The man winced softly as he looked again down at Neji, before slowly nodding. I will see that your cousin. Neji, the girl said flatly, until he redeems himself. In my eyes I have no relationship to this boy. Wincing even more, Hiyashi slowly nodded. I will see that Neji is informed of his lapse in judgment and what that entails. Be sure to tell him. I will be informing Naruto-kun as well. Hiyashi paled at that, his eyes widening a fraction as he would look at his daughter, Hinata. No one puts their hands on me like that without my permission. The girl growled back at her father. Neji was there when Naruto-kun gave that warning. Gulping now, the man nodded again before he reached down, and picked up his nephew, before turning back towards the compound, with an awkward goodbye. Enjoy the rest of the day then, Hinata. I'm not going to let him ruin it, the girl affirmed, before actually putting a sway to her hips as she walked down the street. Watching his daughter walk away for a moment, Hiyashi then looked down at Neji in his arms and shook his head. You young man, are in quite a bit of trouble. There was almost a touch of pity in his words, especially after she tells Naruto. The bar. So, is this just going to be an ongoing joke? The bearded Junin Asuma Sarutobi arched a brow as he looked at the sitting Kurenai and Anko, as they sat next to each other, each dressed out exactly like Kakashi Hackett, right down to the masks and forehead protectors pulled over their left eyes. Did you say something? The pair asked as one before going back to the books in hand, and giggling perversely. Kakashi himself twitched lightly as he threw back a gulp of sake, before grumbling at the two. Seriously, are you trying to get me killed? Why Kakashi-kun? Kurenai spoke up with an innocent smile. Whatever would give you that idea? Naruto. The man responded with a flat tone as he glared at the pair. Ah, is the great Kakashi afraid of our little Naruto-kun? Anko grinned visibly beneath her mask as she glanced up from her book. In a word, the man paused a moment before twitching as he glared at the pair. Yes. Oh, come on Kakashi. Asuma chuckled as he leaned back in his seat. Naruto's a good kid. You're just saying that because you've never been his victim. So, the Hokage's son merely grinned back at the man while the rest of the group stared at him in sheer disbelief. How the hell have you managed that? Genma Shiranui asked in absolute shock. The man paused a moment, considering as he took a deep drag on his cigarette. The kid likes me and dad. But how the hell? The man continued. You had to get caught up in at least some of the mass pranks. Nope. The man shrugged. Was with the fire guard or out on missions almost every time he's pulled one that I might have gotten caught in. Meh. You guys really think Naruto just randomly pulls his pranks without any kind of planning whatsoever? Kakashi looked at the rest of them with a lazy eye. if he doesn't want to pull anything on you, he'll go out of his way to make sure you don't get caught. Tell me again, why the hell is this kid only just now a genin? Genma said with a low, appreciative whistle. Hinata Hyuga. Anko said with a grin, that scary little bitch herself. Hinata. Hyuga. Asuma just blinked at Anko, scary. The shy little girl who stutters and blushes all the time. The little girl that nonchalantly asked me if I knew that with the right gentle fist strike, she could make sure that I couldn't feel anything between my legs, ever again. The woman shuddered softly, with a smile on her lips. Even I'm jealous of. 13 and already has a girlfriend. Kakashi chuckled softly. Little Naruto-kun works fast. No, Kurenai corrected softly with an amused chuckle on her lips. 13, with he and his girlfriend apparently seducing their teammate to join in. Ah, the silver-haired Junin nodded in understanding. Now I know why Hiashi and Inoichi were in here last night. They do seem to take after their mothers, Genma admitted with a soft little chuckle. Man. Hey Kakashi, do you remember? Whatever question he might have asked was instantly cut off by nearly identical blasts of killer intent launched from Anko and Kurenai as both smiled sweetly at him through their masks. Genma immediately sank back down into his seat, a look of fear crossing his face. Kakashi himself just chuckled as he smiled back at the pair. Really now? I'm surprised you're here tonight, Anko. I thought you were going to be tied up. Everyone's attention shifted first to Anko, then back to Kakashi, with Genma holding a thankful expression on his face as the silver-haired man smiled back at them, especially the blushing and grumbling Anko as she responded. It would seem my boyfriend isn't quite sure how to handle that admission. She paused, before grinning sheepishly. I think I broke his brain. I'm sure he'll recover. Asuma chuckled as he took a sip from his sake. So, your team's already getting close, Kurenai. I have to say, I was a little disappointed I didn't get a full Inoshika Cho team. You did get Haruno. I'm sure she'll yell at the boys just as well as the Yamanaka would. Kurenai smiled softly beneath her mask. Besides, I'm fairly certain she fits in better with my squad. It's a good combination, especially if we train the girl as a ranged fighter. Keeping the Hyuga for close range and the Uzumaki for mid. Kakashi spoke up. His abilities do tend to work best in that situation, and he is pretty already a capture-oriented ninja. Yes, he captures, Hinata incapacitates, then if need be, Ino interrogates. Anko grinned, not to mention the absolute humiliation the boy can inflict. Kurenai paused a moment, before she looked speculatively over towards Anko. You mentioned some tricks he likes to do earlier. But you never did elaborate on it. The spiky-haired woman began to sweat lightly as she looked away, hiding a sheepish blush that was overwhelming her features. You see. Nay, Kurenai. Asuma spoke up, grinning softly as he leaned back. The kid calls his style bondage style. The word emphasized with a pointed wiggle of his brows. I'm sure you can think of the kind of things he might have up his sleeve. The beautiful masked woman blushed heavily as she lightly kicked the man underneath the table, before giving a speculative look at Anko, robbing the cradle Anko-chan. No. The response was absolutely vehement as she glared at her friend. I just pissed the brat off the first time I met him, and he decided to teach me a lesson as it was. The embarrassed blush on her face told far more than she intended though, as immediately all the faces locked onto hers, their eyes piercing hungrily, demanding she continue. Gah, stop looking at me like that, you perverts. The woman grumbled, now wishing she wasn't trapped between the wall and her friends. It wasn't like that. Whatever you say, Anko. Kakashi just smiled at her. Not grinned, not leered, simply smiled serenely back at her. Gah. The woman almost screamed as she fell back in her booth. Fine, I'll tell you, but you guys owe me a helluva lot of dango. The group grinned back at her, giving her a slow nod of acceptance before she blushed even further, almost trying to vanish down into her seat as she quietly grumbled back at them. Perverts all of you. Clearing her throat, she sighed. He's got this one trick. That's kinda like a substitution. She paused a moment knowing their eyes were on her. He tied up a rope harness, then substitutes it right there underneath your clothes. Eyes widened at her. Kurenai's bugging out as Asuma gave off a soft chuckle, and Kakashi smiled at the image building up in his head while he responded, oh. What kind of harness? The kind that's tight, and knotted in very sensitive places. The woman snapped back, grumbling again. he pops that off on a kunoichi in the middle of a fight. And well, she blushed heavily and looked away. It gets very distracting. So, Ino. Kurenai's eyes widened as she looked at her friend. Yeah. Anko twitched lightly, and considering how close they are now, I'm guessing she really enjoyed it. She turned her head then glared around the group. No one mentions this to Inoichi, got it? No one mentions what to me. Inoichi's voice spoke up as the man was arching a brow at the group before him, his blue eyes narrowing slightly. Oh, Yamanaka-san. Kurenai spoke up, blinking slightly as she would look at the man. How are you doing today? I just came into a bar, alone, in the middle of the afternoon. The man countered dryly. How do you think I'm doing? Ino. Anko asked curiously. Ino. The man agreed as he pulled a chair over and hung his head. She just left home, wearing a raincoat. Oh. Asuma blinked a moment then eyed the man curiously. What's so odd about her leaving wearing a raincoat? Kurenai gave the bearded man an, "Are you an idiot?" look before watching as Inoichi flinched and continued, besides the fact that it's a perfectly clear day. The man twitched lightly. It's what may, or may not be underneath that coat. The man blinked a moment, before an embarrassed look of understanding flashed across his face. Ah, I see. The rest of the group shifted uncomfortably as Inoichi took a look at them before sighing, his face falling down into his palm. Let me guess, you were talking about something my daughter did that has something to do with her being a very big pervert. Now Yamanaka-san. Kurenai shifted slightly. What makes you think we'd? You remember my wife, the man said simply as he lightly pinched the bridge of his nose. Now, considering what I do remember about what Hiyashi and I talked about last night, I get the feeling this is going to be an ongoing topic of discussion. The man paused a moment before grumbling, considering both our daughters seem to have inherited quite a bit from their mothers. Kakashi paused a moment, knowing he really, truly, probably shouldn't say anything, but well, there is also the fact that Naruto's an Uzumaki. A number of people around the table froze at that, especially Asuma as his face widened considerably. You don't think he's her son, do you? Wheel. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask, considering everything. He loves to play pranks. Inoichi spoke up softly, his face paling even further. He's a loud-mouthed brat, Anko added, her face twisting between horror and amusement. He's rude and not afraid to get in anyone's face. Asuma added quietly, a slight smile on his lips. He uses bondage style, Kakashi added with a happy little smile. Sounds like the kind of thing she would have jumped at, doesn't it? I really need a drink. Inoichi was almost crying as he cupped his face in his hands. My baby girl. My princess. Hey, Kurenai-chan. Kakashi smiled. Want to switch teams? Now Kakashi. The woman responded simply with a neutral expression on her face. You should know I prefer playing with the same team. The rest of the group stared at her, almost spitting out their drinks as Genma's nose began to bleed at the thought. So, that's why you're on a team with Anko. Now Gen-chan. Anko tsked as she leaned over, wrapping an arm about Kurenai's waist. Don't tell me, you haven't noticed how close Nai-chan and I are. Oh yes. The red-eyed woman nodded, turning her face back to Anko as she smiled through her mask, leaning in. I just couldn't imagine my life without my precious Anko-chan. The sound of two thuds was heard seconds later as a smiling Genma was revealed laying out on the floor with a stream of blood flowing past his nose. Beyond him, however, just behind Inoichi, the twitching, paled form of Iruka was seen, his body twitching lightly as the blonde Junin looked down at the Chunin. Huh. I think Kurenai broke your boyfriend Anko. Damn it, he just gets fixed and you go and break him, Nai-chan. Anko grumbled softly. Okay, come on, let's get him up in here. I want something warm to sit on. A few minutes later, Iruka stirred back to consciousness, feeling something warm and soft pressed back against his body, a slight wiggling just against his lap. Blinking rapidly, he quickly made note of his surroundings. On his lap was his girlfriend, dressed like Kakashi. On his left was the wall. On his right was Kurenai, also dressed like Kakashi. Next to her was Kakashi, dressed like himself. As the man blinked, the silver-haired Kakashi leaned forward and waved at him. Yo. It was then that he noticed something else. All three almost had their noses buried in small books, while the rest of the group watched them with a smiling chuckle. Well, except for Inoichi, the blond man gotten his hands on some sake and was quietly sipping at it. Though, that didn't stop the small twinkle of amusement in his eye. Okay. Uruka began, his voice struggling slowly as he looked around him. What the hell? Ah. Is Uruka-kun confused? Kurenai smiled next to him, as she leaned in, casually whispering against his ear. And here, Anko-chan thought, you could handle a bit of fun. The man gulped, audibly, not quite seeing the slight grumbling look Asuma held as he purposely looked away. Anko-chan. The man paused a moment, before growling slightly, what the hell? The woman on his lap stiffened immediately, before slowly turning around, looking down at him with one molten brown eye, staring deep into his gaze. Did you just growl at me? The man paused a moment, considering as he looked back up at his girlfriend on his lap, before twitching slightly. As a matter of fact, I did. He paused a moment, before glaring at her. And she shivered. She didn't yell, scream, or threaten him. She simply shivered as her body pressed back against his as she smiled, wickedly beneath her mask. About damn time. Kurenai giggled as she watched the pair, laughing softly as she leaned back against the both. Oh, looks like you've got her attention now. However, the last thing she expected was for the scarred Chunin to turn his attention, and lock that gaze onto her, while his hand came up, and firmly took hold of Anko's waist. Now. Kakashi-san, would you please step out of the booth for a moment? Right, the silver-haired man responded, carefully slipping away as he stared at the man cautiously. A flicker of worry crossed Kurenai's eyes, as she saw the building grin on Anko's lips. A grin, that most likely spelled doom for at least one person. Before she could fully react, the Chunin next to her had his hand about her waist, and was almost dragging her out of the booth. With an indignant squawk, the red-eyed woman struggled for a moment as she found herself hoisted up by the man's grip on her waist, her body held underneath his arm, as Anko found herself slung over the man's shoulder. Turning calmly to the group, Uruka bowed slightly. Gentlemen, I'll see you another time. Hey, what are you? Whatever else Kurenai might have said, was lost as Uruka almost vanished, taking off out of the bar, both women in tow. Inoichi paused a moment, taking another slow sip of his sake as the rest of the group stared at the spot they last saw the trio. That was the Naruto boy's teacher, wasn't it? The one that's like a big brother or father to him. Yup. Kakashi nodded as he slipped back into his seat. My daughter's doomed to be a bigger pervert than her mother, isn't she? The blond man almost whimpered as he poured himself some more sake. More than likely, the one-eyed Junin nodded in response as he lifted up his book again. But, look on the bright side. Bright side. She'll have a lot of fun. As Inoichi paled even further, he decided to forego the dish in his hand, taking a deep gulp directly from the bottle itself. Oh god. Yosh. A new figure suddenly appeared, almost jumping down next to Inoichi, clad in pure green spandex, giant thick eyebrows waggling about as he released a sparkling smile. Konoha's beautiful green beast has arrived. The man paused a moment, before blinking as he looked around. What did I miss? Naruto's apartment. The boy himself was grinning happily as he thought back to his earlier discussion with Uruka, his eyes playing with mirth and amusement as he did hope the man was able to live up to Anko's expectations, for all their sakes. A twitching little grin, he remembered the care package he'd left with the man. Hopefully tomorrow Anko wouldn't be in any condition to be her usual, frustratedly sadistic self. Not that he was gonna hold his breath for that. It might just mean she was gonna be sadistically satisfied. The thought brought any number of various images to his head, the boy simply did not want to deal with. She already acted enough like a snake as it was. Stretching languidly out, as lay against his couch, at least, until he heard the knock at the door. Smiling, he rose up, casually walked over to open up the door. Only that smile died along with the greeting on his lips as he saw the tinge of red in Hinata's eyes as she looked somewhere between screaming in rage and breaking down crying. Hinata-chan, what's wrong? The boy frowned, lightly pulling her into his arms and his apartment as he quickly shut the door behind them. Neji, she said it softly, curling back against the boy as she buried her head against his shoulder. What did he do? There was a growl on his lips as he looked down at the girl in his arms, holding her tight against his chest as he heard her soft sigh of relief at his embrace. He I was leaving the compound, the girl began, gently leaning in, drawing strength from his warmth as she almost melted into him. He didn't think it was appropriate for me to be going out, and he grabbed me. I shook him off and told him to let me go. He grabbed me again, then again after I told him it was none of his business and to get away from me. Naruto was twitching violently as he reached up, stroking his fingers through the girl's hair, gently, soothingly. I see. I screamed at him, and I guess that alerted my father. The girl smiled slightly a moment later, then I kicked that uptight bastard right between the legs. Huh. The boy paused a moment before leaning down, nuzzling against her neck. So, he's going to need a testicular retrieval, along with an cranial rectal extraction. The girl giggled softly as she nodded, leaning into his warmth again. Yeah, he just, Don't worry, Hinata-chan. The boy smiled softly at her. I'll make sure he learns the meaning of respect. But, not until after we've had our fun, right, Naruto-kun? The girl said firmly as she nuzzled his chest. Right. The boy smiled down at her. So what did you and Ino-chan come up with? Really, Naruto-kun? The girl suddenly blushed brightly. I think we should wait for Ino-chan to get here. Her voice firmed softly. You shouldn't ruin your surprise. A little taste won't hurt, will it? The boy asked, leaning in a bit more, teasing his lips just above her soft pale skin. Bad, Naruto-kun. The girl giggled softly as she nuzzled back against him before lightly pushing off. Just wait a bit for Ino-chan to get here. Bah. The boy grumbled lightly before kissing her atop her head. Fine, we'll wait, and I'll sit here, watching you in that plain old raincoat, wondering what it is you've got on underneath it. With that, the boy flopped down, grumbling lightly as he playfully glared at his teammate from the couch, his arms crossed about his chest. The girl in question giggled softly at his antics, as she would lightly sway her hips directly in front of him. So, are you ready to play? Naruto chuckled softly, as long as we can find them all. Oh, don't worry. Hinata grinned mischievously as she would lightly hold her hands behind her back. Ino-chan and I already took care of that. Did you now? The boy chuckled softly as he watched those pale eyes of the girl glinting playfully. And what did Hinata-chan and Ino-chan come up with? They went and got everyone to come celebrate passing our genin tests. The grin grinned happily. We'll meet up with them at the barbecue place. Is everyone going to be there? The boy asked with an arched brow. Well, as always, Sasuke's a coin flip. The girl shrugged nonchalantly before she settled down onto the couch next to the blonde boy. Hopefully he shows up. I need to talk to him about something. The glint was in his eyes. I'm about to do something that will make someone squeal in abject terror and humiliation. Glint. Oh. There was an arch of the brow as Hinata smiled at him. About something. Yup. Something. The boy affirmed, smiling back at her. Gotta save the surprise after all. Naughty Naruto-kun. The girl pouted softly but nodded her head, leaning in against his chest with a soft sigh, before they could hear a knock at the door. When the boy rose up to answer, Hinata shook her head, grinning at him softly as she stood up herself. I'll get it, Naruto-kun. Putting an extra little sway to her hips as she moved, she walked to the door, and with a simple motion, drew it open, revealing the grinning face of Ino as she quickly slipped inside. Hey Hinata-chan, Naruto-kun. Hello, Ino-chan. Naruto greeted her with a smile, as he watched the girl dart forward, and plop herself down on his lap. Ah, much better. The blonde girl giggled happily as she snuggled up against Naruto's chest. Ino-chan. Hinata half squeaked angrily as she stomped over. That's my spot. It was empty. And remember, teammates share, right, Hinata-chan? The girl smiled back innocently at Hinata. The Hyuga girl glared back at the blue-eyed girl as she would put her hands on her hips, almost beginning to lecture the girl before Naruto sent a rope snaking out about her waist, and pulled her down with Ino into his lap. Yes, they do. So, you two will share, got it? Both girls blushed, before giggling softly, snuggling in closer against him and each other as they let out small little giggles. Naruto-kun. The boy chuckled a bit, his eyes soft as he reached up, stroking gently against both their backs as they gave off a contented sigh. Her eyes closed. Ino spoke first. I think my dad's gonna get drunk again tonight. Oh, what makes you think that, Ino-chan? Hinata spoke up quietly, not opening her eyes as she wrapped her arm around her female teammate. Oh, He saw me heading out in this raincoat, and I teased him a bit. The blonde girl giggled softly. He's probably thinking about just what I may or may not have underneath it. Well, I don't know about him. Naruto spoke up, chuckling softly, but I know I am. Oh, is Naruto-kun curious? Ino grinned softly, giggling just a bit at him. Did you show him a little peek, Hinata-chan? No, she didn't, Naruto answered, growling lightly. She made me wait until you were here. The girl in question blushed softly before giggling just a bit, smiling as she lightly shrugged her shoulders. Well, she is here now, isn't she? Yes, she is, the boy nodded in agreement before he smirked. All right, you two, up, let's see how badly we're going to pull it over on them. Giggling, both girls stood up, standing one next to the other, as they took their time, slowly undoing their coats, pulling them open for the boy to see. Oh yeah, this is gonna be fun. Blushing slightly as he took a look at the girls, Naruto gave them both a broad, wicked grin. Later, man, Hinata and Ino were the ones that asked us here. Where are they? Hiba grumbled softly as he leaned back in the booth, his shaggy hair wild against his coat as he shifted just a bit. Even the high and mighty Uchiha is here. Tisk, Ino's just being troublesome probably. A brunette boy spoke up with a grumble, his head laying on the table as his spiky hair was pulled behind his head, wanting to be fashionably later or something. Man, I hope they don't take too much longer, a plump boy added, his swirl-decorated cheeks lightly puffed out. I'm hungry. You're always hungry, Choji. A pink-haired Sakura Haruna spoke up. At least with Sasuke-kun here, we know that Ino Pig is gonna show up. Given how she behaved at the academy, that seems likely. A taller, stoic boy in a thick, high-collared white jacket spoke up. Doesn't mean we can't hope otherwise, Shino. A dark-haired boy with spiky black hair countered as he grumbled just a bit, along with annoying, other Kunoichi. Sasuke-kun. Sakura flinched slightly at his words, the cold tone stinging into her as she flinched against his uncaring stare. Hey, sorry for taking so long, guys. A cheerful voice spoke up from the front of the restaurant. We had to pick up Naruto-kun. About damn. Hiba spoke up as he looked towards the newcomers, his voice trailing off as his eyes widened considerably, finally managing to squeak out, time. Shikamaru only blinked, his eyes widening for a moment before shaking his head, troublesome as always, Ino. Woo. Choji stared in absolute amazement as he looked at the newly arrived trio. Ino Pig. Hinata. Sakura's eyes were huge as she could only stare at the three. Very intriguing, Shino managed to admit. Hey, Sasuke let off an amused chuckle. Having fun, Naruto? Always. The blonde responded with a chipper smile as he slid into the booth, before giving a light tug on the leashes in his hand. Leashes that lead up to a pair of thick black leather collars, each with heart-shaped locks that bore the names of the respective kunoichi that bore them. Below that, they each wore a matching black cropped halter top, cut deep to expose much of their chests, trimmed in purple and filled with black fishnet up to their collars. Past their bare stomachs, each wore a simple, tight little black skirts, barely covering their bodies with any measure of decency as the sides were laced a good 4 inches apart. Each wore simple, lacy gloves up to their forearms, with matching cuffs over each wrist, and slim little open heels on their feet as they moved into the booth with Naruto. Hinata quickly took her seat, demurely crossing her legs as she settled against Naruto's lap. Ino merely grinned, that wicked, saucy grin of hers as she sidled in against Naruto's side, lightly, visibly stroking her fingers against Hinata's side. Something wrong, boys. Ino almost purred out in a low, throaty voice as she casually leaned up, lightly kissing against Hinata's neck. Hiba looked like a fish out of water, his eyes bulging out of his sockets as he struggled to push anything past his rapidly opening and shutting mouth, his gaze glued on the figures in front of him. He simply couldn't get the words to do more than make strange, hissing, gurgling, squeaking little sounds. What the hell, Ino Pig? Sakura's eyes were wider than even Kiba's as she pointed her finger in the girl's direction. What are you doing? I thought it was obvious. The blonde girl paused, arching a brow as she lightly stretched out, resting her head against Naruto's shoulder as she casually stroked Hinata's bare stomach, earning a rising blush from the pale-eyed figure. I think it's rather obvious too, Naruto agreed with a casual grin and a nod. Don't you agree, Hinata-chan? Oh, yes, Naruto-kun. Hinata spoke up, a low moan of enjoyment escaping her lips as she would reach out, brushing her fingers casually against the single lock of hair Ino let fall across her face. Seems perfectly obvious to me, Ino-chan. Tisk. Being troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. Through, he couldn't quick bring himself to look away from the scene before him. I think you broke Choji. Choji merely stared, a hollow, vacant-eyed look at the three, his mouth hanging open, his mind, simply shut down. Next to him, Shino arched a brow, waving his hand up and down in front of the boy's face before nodding softly. I would have to agree with Shikamaru's assent. Bah, what are you all so worked up over? Sasuke shrugged with a bored look on his face. Naruto's just showing off. Told you. Ino-chan. Naruto chuckled as he looked down at Ino. Bah. The girl grumbled softly before glaring over at the confused-looking Uchiha. Just had to be gay, didn't you? Sasuke is not gay. Sakura immediately protested. Sakura-san. Hinata spoke up, moaning softly as they could see how Naruto was kissing against her bare shoulder on one side, while Ino nibbled up her ear on the other. If he's not, why did he ask that question? Sasuke blushed lightly at the girl's words, looking pointedly away while a suddenly horrified-looking Kiba inched lightly away from the black-haired boy. Seeing the reaction, Sakura blinked, then blinked again, her eyes widening with a soft whimper. No. Meh, what are you pulling away for, dog breath? Sasuke grumbled. You're too butch to be my type. Hey. Kiba growled back, before blinking just a bit. Are you calling me ugly? I wasn't, but now that you mention it. The Uchiha smirked slightly as he leaned back smugly in his seat. Why yeah. Sasuke's been more interested in Naruto-kun, Hinata spoke up, giggling softly at the uncomfortable twitch from the boy whose lap she sat on. The dark-haired boy glared at Hinata with a slight grumble and moment, where he almost seemed to be pouting back at her. Hush, puppy girl. Nye Spanky. Hinata stuck her tongue back at the Uchiha, before giggling softly and snuggling into Naruto. I got my man. Our man Hinata-chan. Ino spoke up, lightly poking the girl's exposed stomach, eliciting a giggle. Again, Sasuke twitched, grumbling softly. Yeah, don't have to rub it in. Sasuke. Naruto. Sakura blinked, then blinked again, staring from one to another as the images built up in her mind, just before she blushed a shade of red to make Hinata jealous and flew back in her seat, a stream of blood flying out of her nose. Oi. Just remember, ya bastard, Naruto grumbled. No more. Accidentally. Bumbling into me. Oh. But Naruto-kun. The Uchiha's eyes flashed brilliantly as he positively leered at you. How could you possibly imply that I, a noble Uchiha, would stoop to such cheap theatrics for such base reasons as to grope your person? Your hands were on my crotch, the blonde shot back flatly. Oh, were they? Sasuke said with an over-exaggerated gasp. I never knew. You were squeezing. Completely involuntary reflex, I'm sure. You were groping. I have no such recollection of these events. Except when you're having a lonely night. Of course, Sasuke shot back, before suddenly blushing. I mean, I have no idea what you could be implying. Sasuke. Ino practically screamed. How dare you grope Naruto-kun before me? Oh please. The Uchiha responded dismissively as he waved his hand in Hinata's direction. Puppy there knows the goods better than me. She's been sneaking peeks at him for over a year now. Hinata-chan. Ino gasped, as she looked at her teammate in askance. How could you? Well, Ino-chan. Hinata stumbled out with a brilliant blush on her face. Not once. Even offering me to show me the memories. Ino pouted. Or, letting me use your eyes myself. The group could feel a cold drop of sweat, all running down their faces as the blonde huffed loudly, while Shikamaru grumbled, troublesome women. Oh, but they're so much fun anyway. Naruto grinned softly, even if they're a pair of perverted headache and a halves. Ah, Naruto-kun says the nicest things, Ino giggled lecherously. For that, he's definitely going to have to get dessert, with extra whipped cream. She paused, leaning in, giving a stage whisper against his neck. Some chocolate syrup. Some cherries, don't you agree, Hinata-chan? The now violently blushing Hinata rapidly bobbed her head up and down in agreement as she began to bleed slowly out of her nose, a broad, giggling grin plastered on her face. Oh, yes, Ino-chan, definitely, you're going to leave enough for me too, aren't you? As Kiba whimpered softly, the images the girls brought up slow cooking his mind, Even Shino and Shikamaru managed to flush slightly as Ino responded, definitely Hinata-chan, I'm sure. He'd be more than happy to share. That makes me hungry. Choji spoke up happily, how about we actually get something to eat now? As three sets of eyes stared at the boy incredulously, Naruto laughed brightly, sure Choji, sure, he paused before suddenly grinning his wicked grin at Sasuke and Uchiha. I need to talk to you later about something I need your help with. Oh, Sasuke arched a brow back at the blonde. Trust me, you'll like it. That night, Neji struggled futilely against his bonds, his body stripped down to nothing but a little pink thong, matching the shiny ball gag strapped in his mouth. He was cuffed, bent over something, he wasn't sure what, the chill touch of the air creeping against his skin as the room was covered in darkness. There was no mistake about it, he was in deep, deep trouble. Suddenly, a light could be seen, somewhere behind him as heavy, clicking steps could be heard, moving step by step towards him. After a moment, he waited, as the boots seemed to be circling behind him, moving this way and that, before pausing as the air suddenly whistled in protest, as something thin and strong cracked against his, before a somewhat familiar voice spoke up, so, I understand that you've been having some issues with respect. A moment later a positively wickedly grinning Sasuke Uchiha stepped into view, dressed in a pair of tight black leather pants, a matching, sleeveless fishnet toque. In his hand, he held a simple, black riding crop. He lightly ran underneath Neji's jaw as he lifted the worried, frightened eyes up to his own. Don't worry though, Neji-kun. Quote. He grinned, downright mercilessly, I'm going to make sure I teach you how to be respectful tonight. Leaning in, he slowly, casually whispered upon the boy's ear, very, very respectful. Smiling brightly, he suddenly slapped the crop across his hands. Well then, let's get started, shall we? Let go of me. The girl screamed as she struggled against the bonds binding her arms and legs tightly together as she dangled off the boy's shoulders. I am Hanabi Hyuga. Do you know what my father will do to you for this outrage? Naruto calmly ignored the girl, taking his time as he walked through the Hyuga compound at a leisurely, sedate pace as the girl continued to scream her head off. Do you hear me? Hanabi screamed again, struggling, trying to buck herself off his shoulder and out of the ropes. Let me go, you weak, uncouth simpleton. Really, Hanabi-chan? The boy spoke up cheerfully. If I'm weak, what does that make you since I beat you? The girl paused, before glaring angrily at the boy. Stop calling me that. Naruto. A voice calmly called out from a door they were pausing, causing the boy to pause for a moment and stick his head in. Yes. Hiyashi. The boy asked in return as Hanabi's eyes came alive with promise of soon-to-be rendered vengeance on the boy. Where are you going with my daughter? The head of the Hyuga clan was calmly and quietly sipping at his tea, not even looking up towards the boy as asking how his day was going. Oh, I'm just kidnapping her. The boy responded offhandedly. Ah, I see. The man nodded ever so simply as he took another sip. Ransom demands. Dinner at Ichiraku Ramen. The boy offered ever so casually. The man paused a moment as if in consideration. Too steep. I'll just have to wait until you get tired of her. Father. The girl shrieked in outrage at the simple dismissal. Hey, I'll have her back in a couple of days or so. He paused a moment in consideration. I make no promises her sunny disposition will remain intact though. Of course, the man nodded as he took another sip of his tea. Have a good time with Naruto, honey. I'll see you when you get back. The girl in question was simply shocked into silence as her father took her abduction as if it were as common as his tea. What the hell was going on? Her father had killed the last man who tried to kidnap one of his daughters. Oh, by the way, Hiyashi. Naruto spoke up cheerfully. I got a picture of Mr. Snuggle Pants. The man instantly froze before he turned his head to slowly simply look at Naruto. Wah. The boy grinned happily. This wouldn't feel like a proper abduction if I'm not getting chased by someone. I have some sense of tradition after all. I see. The man responded in resignation. And your conditions? Gimme a chase and the secret of Mr. Snuggle Pants stays where it is. And if I happen to refuse? You won't. The boy smiled in response. And if I should anyway? The man pushed. I start to tell Loudmouth here the story, while I'm walking past the branch house. Quote. You are your teacher's student, the man responded in resignation. Of course. In an instant the man shifted, his face becoming a mask of rage as he bellowed out, "Get back here, you little brat. Unhand my daughter." Naruto simply laughed as he ran. Hanabi let off a string of most unladylike curses at the boy as she struggled against her bonds. Neji took one look at the scene in front of him, shrugged, and went back to his training. He did not want to be involved, his was still hurting from the Uchiha's lesson. Some time later at Ichiraku Ramen. "See, isn't it nice to get out of that stuffy compound and get some exercise now and then?" Naruto offered cheerfully as he sat next to Hiyashi on a stool, grinning broadly as a bound, and now gagged Hanabi glared venomously at the two. "I suppose," the man offered neutrally, trying to keep the smile from blossoming across his lips as he carefully ate at his bowl of ramen. "Bah, you need to get out more." Naruto waved his hands. "Find a woman, have plenty of kinky that sensei can watch and drool over in heaven." The man almost spat out the noodle in his bowl, coughing loudly before he turned his eyes onto the 13-year-old boy, his daughter's teammate, his dead wife's student, telling him to in a nutshell go out and get laid. Said boy merely grinned back at the man as he took another slurp of his noodles. "What? You really want to wait and have her chewing you out for not giving her something to watch with some action?" "Naruto." Hiyashi coughed pointedly. "I do not think it's appropriate to discuss such things in front of my daughter." The boy shrugged back as he kept eating his noodles. "Hinata-chan's been worried about you. Seriously. Besides, when you went to the bar with Ino-chan's dad, when was the last time you even went out?" "I have responsibilities," the man began, before a frighteningly familiar look crossed Naruto's face. "Hiyashi, I will give you a dressing down in front of your daughter," the boy said slowly and carefully. "I know how to, and I will. I was there when she able to keep you from driving yourself into madness like you tried after you died." His face softened then before he continued, "I'm a ninja now. I can't be around to keep dragging you out of the darkness. You need to start doing it on your own. Especially for your daughters. What would my family do without you, boy?" Hiyashi managed a soft chuckle as he looked down at the kid. I imagine you'd have a stuck shoved up your like Neji and Hanabi, and Hinata would be almost completely destroyed confidence-wise," the boy responded quietly, before continuing, "I know what it means to be a ninja, Hiyashi. I know what could happen to me on any mission, something going wrong, and I don't come back." He looked away for a long moment, before looking up into the softened features of the Hyuga clan head. "I don't want those precious to me to lose themselves because I can't be there to save them." Naruto. There was a sadness there in the man's eyes as realization slowly dawned in their depths. He owed this boy more than he could ever imagine repaying. "Thank you." Next to them, Hanabi watched with wide, uncertain eyes as her father's hand came down on the boy's shoulder. She'd seen him around the compound before, laughing and playing with her sister more than anything, but she didn't really know who he was. Listening to him talk to, berate her father, and have the man simply accept it. She wasn't sure what to make of it. "Hey, I promised her, remember?" The boy smiled that sad smile of his as he looked up at the man. "She helped me find myself, my way, my life. I owe her more than I can ever pay. I know she's proud of you, Naruto." The man spoke very softly, "Just as I know your parents are. Ya wanna know something funny?" The boy said softly, "I never missed them until I met her. Before that, they were just things I couldn't quite comprehend. Phantoms." He paused a moment, shaking his head softly, "But when she talked about them, the look in her eye, the way she spoke, she made them real for me." Hiyashi wordlessly looked down at the boy, not saying much, for a long moment, before looking, staring at the wall and beyond it as his eyes glazed over, the past awakening before him. "She and your mother were close friends, you've got a lot of her spirit in you. Passionate, unrestrained, undeniable. It didn't matter to her if you were a genin or the Hokage himself, she was like a storm with a smile on her lips." Quote. Naruto froze where he was looking at the noodles, not saying anything as he heard the man's words, the emotions in his voice, before slowly looking up, watching his eyes, almost afraid to breath. "She was a bit of a terror when she was younger," the man chuckled softly, leaving himself lost in the past for a moment. "Quite the tomboy, really. Never afraid to get her hands dirty." He paused again, before slowly pulling himself back to the present. "When she got older, she was known as one of the most beautiful kunoichi in the elemental countries, and one of the most powerful." Quote. Thank you, Hiyashi. the boy said softly, his voice, barely a whisper as it left his lips, his eyes, stung with tears as he could feel the swell of emotions rippling through him. The man would look down at the boy before his hand gently squeezed onto his shoulder. I wish I could tell you more about them, Naruto. I wish I could tell you everything. But you can't, the boy responded softly. I know. That's what everyone tells me. You have enough on your shoulders, Naruto, the man said softly, and enough burdens to bear as it is. Even you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. All right, the boy said softly as he reached down, picking up Hanabi and tossing the girl over his shoulder, listening to the quiet sound of protest the girl made. I'll have her back sometime soon. I'll see what I can do about the stick up her. There was another muffled protest as the girl squirmed again, anger flushing across her face as she tried to kick at the boy futilely. With a nod, Hiyashi continued to eat his ramen. I know you will, Naruto. See you soon. Later, Hiyashi. And with that, the boy was gone, carrying off the squirming bundle of Hyuga Spitfire. You can't shoulder the weight of the world, Naruto. The man paused softly as he took another bite of his noodles. But, I know you'd try in a heartbeat. Take care of the burdens you've already taken. You've cost yourself enough as it is. Hey, Tsuki Ichiraku shook his head as he listened to the man speak. That kid, he's something, isn't he? He's his parents' child, Hiyashi responded quietly. Even without knowing them, he can be no less. They must have been something to produce a kid like that, the chef smiled back at the man. They were, Hiyashi responded, laying down payment for the meals, something amazing. With a quiet nod, the head of the Hyuga clan rose, then turned, walking quietly down the street as he made his way towards a certain flower shop. The boy had been right, and perhaps he could find the strength to remember old bonds. Dun dun duun. Naruto paused a moment as he looked around the forested area, nodding casually before dropping the girl down on the ground, and peering at her. Well then, Hanabi-chan, looks like we're here. Grinning, he reached down and carefully undid the gag stuffed in her mouth with a happy little smile on his lips. I'm going to kill you. The little girl screamed as she glared angrily up at the boy. Kill, kill, kill. Yeesh, the stick up yours is almost as big as the one up Neji's. The boy chuckled softly as he stretched out. Ah well, I do enjoy a challenge. The girl glared up at the boy, haughtily lifting her chin. I don't know how you managed to convince my father of this, but. Nay, yeesh, the boy shook his head and chuckled. You were a lot quieter as a baby. The girl blinked at that sudden comment. I said, you were a lot quieter as a baby, he smirked softly, though, a lot stinkier. I remember when I had to change your diapers. Gaah. The girl flushed crimson as she continued to glare balefully at the boy. Liar. Nope. You used to make the stinkiest messes. Naruto was smirking, broadly as his eyes twinkled brilliantly. I mean, I don't know what they used to feed you, but man. Shut up. The girl screamed, her eyes bulging as her face burned crimson. That's almost Hinata-chan red, the boy observed. I guess you're definitely her sister, Stinky-chan. Kill. Hanabi squealed, as she pushed herself forward, trying to lunge at the boy with her mouth. You know, that can't be good for your teeth, Naruto deadpanned. Sure you don't want an apple to take a bit out of instead? Grr. The girl just growled back at the boy as she glared balefully at him. So this is your sister Hinata-chan. A new voice spoke up curiously, female and energetic as a blonde girl almost bounced into the fallen Hyuga's vision, clad almost entirely in purple. She acts more like your cousin. He used to babysit her. Another voice offered as the bound girl watched her older sister gracefully walked forward, and father was so busy he allowed the elders to help raise her, and well. The girl shrugged a bit, they lodged it quite firmly up there, Ino-chan. Yeah, but that's why we're here now. Naruto spoke up cheerfully. We're going to help dislodge that stick from Stinky-chan's. Stop calling me that. The girl screamed again as she squirmed on the ground. Stinky-chan? Ino inquired curiously. Naruto-kun used to have to change her diapers, Hinata clarified. It was rather pungent as I recall. Ah. The blonde nodded. Stinky-chan. Arrrgh. The little girl practically screamed, lightly banging her head against the ground. Now, Stinky-chan, Naruto spoke up as he lightly shifted the girl up so she could no longer smash her head against the ground. No need to hurt yourself. I hate you. The little girl spat back at the boy, growling deep in the back of her throat. Hum. The boy paused, putting his chin between his thumb and index finger as he considered. Nah. You don't. He paused again, before grinning as he made a sign with his hands. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna punish you though. Instantly a group of 3 shadow clones popped into existence as they advanced on the suddenly frightened girl. No. Stay away. As one, did they descend, a solitary purpose in their minds as their grins spoke the promises they would keep. And as one, did they begin, suddenly tickling the girl like mad. No. The girl struggled against the giggles rippling through her, fighting back as best she could, squirming, writhing with fright as her eyes stared back at the figures that had already shucked her sandals to tickle her feet. Stoop. Hanabi finally couldn't hold back any longer, erupting into a storm of giggling laughter as she struggled to breath, her face reddening as tears streamed down her eyes while she flailed about against her bonds. Finally though, the tickling slowed, then stopped, leaving her to gasp hungrily for breath. Panting, softly, coming down from the storm of sensations, she grumbled softly, that wasn't nice. What? You'd have preferred a spanking? Naruto asked humorously. Well, she is Hinata-chan's sister, Ino chirruped, earning herself a blushing glare from the older pale-eyed girl. Hush Ino-chan, Hinata murmured just a bit as she would nevertheless shift lightly and lean against the girl. Now girls, Naruto chided lightly, play nice. We're here for Stinky-chan after all. Stop calling me that, Hanabi snapped quietly, I am not stinky. Well, you're definitely not happy, Ino chuckled as her hand came up, wrapping about Hinata's shoulder as she lightly stroked the dark strands of hair. This is an intervention, Naruto nodded sagely, you've been dependent on the stick-up-yer for too long, we can't allow you to follow down Neji's path. And what's wrong with Neji-san huh? The girl shot back, blushing lightly at the words. Oh gods, it's worse than we thought, Naruto said in horror as he turned and looked at Hinata and Ino, she admires him. It's good we decided to do this now instead of later then Naruto-kun, Ino added seriously. Yes, no telling how bad she could have gotten, Hinata nodded sagely, she could have started babbling about fate and no one being able to change and so on. Yes, we must make sure to take proper preventative measures now. Naruto declared proudly, though, I'm not sure if we should really show her those photos. Ah, but they're so cute. Ino giggled as she continued to stroke Hinata's hair, don't you think Hinata-chan? The girl in question blushed brightly as she buried her head against Ino's chest, I really don't want to see those pictures, ever again. Ah, don't be like that Hinata-chan, Ino said soothingly. I went blind. The girl shivered softly, well, not actually blind but still. I think she was traumatized enough. Ino-chan, Naruto offered with a chuckle as he stretched out before grinning at Hanabi. All right Stinky-chan, here's the deal, we're going to make you have fun and loosen up, until you get that stick out of your and act like a normal person. And what gives you the right to kidnap me and force me into this? The girl screeched again. Your mother, the boy responded simply as he lightly petted the girl atop her head. Now, Hinata-chan, Ino-chan, ready to have some fun. Yup. Everything's ready to go, Naruto-kun. Ino giggled happily. Ah. Good. Naruto nodded as he casually started untying the bonds holding the fuming Hanabi in place. Then, once the last was undone, he quickly grabbed the girl before she could escape and tossed her struggling, flailing body over his shoulder. Come on girls, Stinky-chan needs her bath. Let me go. The girl screamed angrily as the boy carried her like a sack of potatoes. I won't forgive you for this. Nay, you will eventually. The boy grinned, leading her off, until they suddenly came upon a large pool filled entirely with wet, glistening mud. Bath time. What? Her eyes widened in horror as she looked at the pool of mud. No. You wouldn't. That's not a bath. Sure it is Stinky-chan. Naruto grinned back before tossing her in a mud bath. No. The cry was cut off, as the girl was dumped, face first into the mud, with a loud splat. Ooh. Ino grinned as she looked at the girl, that's gonna be a pain to get clean. Naruto whistled innocently as he watched Ino giggling at the edge of the pool before he casually pushed her in with the girl. Oops. Heeey. Ino was suddenly flailing around the mud, next to Hanabi, grumbling softly as she glared up at Naruto through her mud-caked face. Wah. The boy grinned, I thought mud was good for the skin. Smiling softly, Hinata carefully leaned in close, slowly, softly whispering against his ear as he could feel her soft hands moving over his body. Naruto-kun. Air. Yes, Hinata-chan. He asked back with a slight blush. It's time. She breathed, slowly against her ear, before suddenly pushing him hard, for you to join them. Ack. The boy fell back into the mud with the other two girls, before bursting out laughing with a grin. Oh, a wise girl Grabbing a handful of mud, Naruto suddenly slung, directly at Hinata, catching the smiling girl right on the face with a grin. Ha. Eek. The girl giggled softly as she was splattered by the mud, pouting back at the boy. Bad Naruto-kun. Before the boy could respond, he himself was splattered right in the face, not once, but twice, by the two girls in the pool with him. Pausing a moment, he turned and caught the satisfied little smirk on Hanabi's face, before grinning broadly. Way to go, Stinky-chan. Grr. Again the girl threw another splatter of mud at the boy, who in turn, dodged through the mud to throw some back at her, catching her on her face, causing the girl to let out an angry shriek. Eee. Ah. Come on, Stinky-chan, you can do better than that. The boy laughed loudly as he dodged through the almost syrupy mud being thrown at him again and again, before suddenly a mess of it was dumped on his head. Ha. That'll teach you to forget you're not facing only one opponent. Ino crowed victoriously as she grinned back at the boy. At least, until she caught sight of his fiendish, muddy grin. Oh, I didn't forget about you, Ino-chan. The boy grinned in response as he would suddenly grab hold of the girl, and pull her with him, down into the mud, covering them both completely as she shrieked helplessly. Naruto-kun. The girl squealed softly, covered head to toe in mud as she flicked it off her fingers at his face, watching him laugh back at her just as completely covered. Seeing a possibly chance to escape, Hanabi grinned as she began to quietly slosh towards the edge of the pool, before suddenly finding her escape cut off by her gently smiling sister. Going somewhere, Hanabi-chan? The girl paused a moment before she noticed how her sister's hands were held behind her back. Maybe. Hearing the hopeful reply the girl made, Hinata shook her head and grinned. Tisk tisk. Now Hanabi-chan, you're saying that like you didn't enjoy throwing that mud at Naruto-kun. The girl huffed at her sister, even as she struggled to keep the smile off her face, at least, until she felt a water balloon burst over her head, as her sister was smiling down at her, innocently as she summoned another from the scroll she'd kept behind her back. Wiggling her eyebrows, the elder sister smiled serenely down at her startled younger sibling. You might want to run now. And with that, the girl began to lob the water balloons at her sister, who shrieked at the cold water splashing over her and ran back towards the laughing Ino and Naruto. Well, the pair were laughing, until Hanabi ducked behind them to evade the fire and they suddenly found themselves caught in it, leaving them to sputter in return. Hey, Naruto protested. Oh, gonna play it that way? He grinned down at Hanabi, huddled against his back. Come on, Stinky-chan, let's get her. The younger girl didn't even have a chance to protest her nickname as Naruto scooped up mud, beginning to fling it across the pool back at Hinata, who shrieked playfully and tried to avoid the splattering mud. Not to be outdone by the boy, Hanabi herself moved out from behind her shield and grabbed her own mud, laughing softly as she threw it back at her sister. A moment later Ino joined in, and quickly Hinata found herself just as muddied as the rest of them, covered and splattered with mud as she threw her balloons eagerly back at the group. It was sometime later that the little game finally ended, and the group made their way to a nearby lake, cleaning themselves and their clothes off, before falling into another little playful fight, splashing each other with the water as they went for a swim. As they walked back to camp, Hanabi herself was caught in a soft peal of giggles at the three's antics, though an occasional scowl broke out at a Stinky-chan crack. When they arrived, Naruto quickly began to put wood into the fire before grinning at Ino. Well, Ino-chan, if you'd be so kind. The boy grinned softly, his eyes dancing with a grin. Bah, just because you're too lazy to learn a decent fire technique. The girl rolled her eyes, grinning back at the boy before lighting the fire with a grin. Hey, whined Element. The boy pouted softly before stretching out. Besides, you need the practice. The girl rolled her eyes as she leaned back. So, what are we gonna do now? I was thinking. S'mores. The boy grinned as he pulled out a bag of marshmallows, chocolate and graham crackers. After that, He shrugged just a bit before chuckling, maybe some more fun. Why are you doing this? Hanabi spoke up quietly before anyone else could respond. Doing what, Stinky-chan? The boy grinned back at her as he stretched, warming his hands against the fire. Grr. All this. The young girl pouted softly at the boy before gesturing around her. The mud fights, the water balloons, all of it. Oh, that. The boy shrugged softly before grinning. You having fun? The girl glared at the boy silently for a long moment, before slowly, reluctantly nodding her head, yes. That's why. Naruto responded with a grin. Why do you care about my having fun? There was a tone of frustration. Why do you care at all? Still haven't figured it out, Stinky-chan. The boy smiled softly as he started to open up the bag of marshmallows, while giving Hinata a pointedly look with a grin. What? You're doing this for my sister? Asked, her tone a bit frostier now. Nope. Though, her wanting you to loosen up too is a bonus. The boy grinned back at her as he stretched out, slowly, easily. No, there's someone else that I'm doing this for. My father. Again, just a bonus. The boy grinned mischievously as he watched the increasingly frustrated girl. Who then? She sighed, audibly as she humphed lightly. Your mother, he said in a soft, simple voice as he would stick a marshmallow on the tip of a stick before lightly letting it heat over the fire. Other. The girl paused, uncertainly as she looked at the boy. Your mother, he said slowly, evenly turning the fluffy confection, my teacher. Mother. Taught you. The girl turned her head, turning her eyes to her sister who nodded gently in confirmation, a smile on her lips. Yes, mother was Naruto-kun's first teacher. Hinata smiled as he moved over, sitting next to the boy to snuggle up against his side. He's been looking after us since you were a baby, Hanabi-chan. Hence the embarrassing baby stories. The boy grinned softly. Why, I remember one time. Stop. The little girl almost screamed. Her face flushed crimson as she buried her face in her hands. I do not need to hear all these things I did as a baby. Anyway, the boy grinned softly as he would lightly pull the now toasted marshmallow away from the heat and fire as he lightly offered it up to Hanabi, who, after staring at it a moment, carefully pulled it off, and tossed the crisped, melting mallow into her mouth. I promised your mother I'd look after you too. I don't remember you looking out for me that much. The girl huffed quietly. Most of it was when you were a lot younger. No offense, Stink-chan, but Hinata-chan and your father were hit a lot harder by her death than you. He paused a moment as he lightly stared at the fire. You were still young enough that it didn't hit home as much. Then, there was the cloud incident. Hinata shivered at that, hugging a bit tighter against Naruto in the process, while Ino moved next to her, gently cradling the girl between her teammates. Naruto-kun was busy, trying to keep from losing father and I. He didn't think things would get so out of control with you. Things are perfectly in control with me. The girl huffed lightly even as she nibbled more on the toasted mallow. Yes, a young girl trying to act like she's an adult, all prim and proper, not having any fun or being a child is certainly perfectly fine. The sarcasm dripped acidically from the boy's words. Do you have any idea what your mother would do to the elders if she was still alive for the shit they pulled? The girl blinked slightly, but I'm just trying to be a proper Hyuga. Like mother was. Two sets of eyes simply stared at her, for a long, drawn-out moment, before Naruto twitched slowly and visibly. Proper Hyuga. Sensei. They told you that she was. Naruto-kun. Hinata said soothingly, stroking his back gently. I'm gonna kill M. He said it, visibly seething as he twitched, in the slowest, most humiliating way possible. What? Hanabi blinked, uncertain as she looked at the angry boy. But, Naruto-kun. Hinata spoke up. You don't have the bloodline limit to summon the redneck treefolk to sodomize them to death in the middle of the village. The rest of them stared at the girl, their eyes bulging slightly at the image she conjured, causing the girl to blush brightly as she continued. What? It's in the history books as the way the first executed traitors. You scare me sometimes, Hinata-chan, Ino said simply as she still snuggled up against the girl. Blushing lightly, the girl snuggled against both of her teammates in response. Sorry, Ino-chan. Anyway, Naruto continued, after that disturbing tidbit of information. The boy paused before looking at Hanabi. When I first met your mother, she was working at her shop, dressed in a corset and tight leather pants. Does that sound like the elders were telling you she acted? No. The girl blushed brilliantly, a horrified look on her face. She wouldn't. She did, Hanabi-chan. Hinata spoke up, blushing as well before she pulled out a photo album, handing it over to her sister. Here. See for yourself. What? The girl curiously opened the album, but they're on the first page. The images, no. Yup. Naruto responded, pushing another mallow onto the stick and rolling it over the fire. I think that might have been customer appreciation night. Hanabi stared at the boy for a moment, before promptly falling back in a dead faint. That went better than I thought, the boy said casually as he would crisp the mallow until it was lightly browned. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Ino blinked as she would start to roast her own mallow. I thought she was gonna run off before fainting. He shrugged, grinning lightly. This is much easier though. So what are we going to do now, Naruto-kun? Hinata spoke up in her curious little voice. Naruto grinned in return as he would lean in, whispering lightly against her ear. Make her look at the entire album, of course. Then, we'll see where we need to go from there. Sometime later. He lied to me. There was outrage in that voice as the young girl shrieked angrily as she came to her realization. That bastard Neji lied to me. Well, he is a bastard. Naruto nodded. After he attacked Hinata, I had to look into getting him some proper lessons in respect. He what? Turned down the volume, Stinky-chan. The blonde boy winced lightly as he pushed his finger into his ear and wiggled it around. I really don't wanna go deaf. He paused, before suddenly grinning conspiratorially. I've got pics if you're interested. The girl's dainty little hands shot out expectantly, her pale eyes burning as she wiggled her fingers. Gimme. There's hope for you yet, Stinky-chan. The boy laughed, before he handed over the photographs of Neji's, disciplining with the Uchiha. I still say we need to mail those to Sakura. Ino giggled softly as she lightly licked at Hinata's ear, drawing a blush across the girl's face. Hinata-chan tastes so nice. Fortunately, Hanabi's attention was glued on the photographs in her hand, blushing brightly as she flipped from one to the next, giggling all the while as her sister shivered to suppress her moans. Be bad, Ino-chan. Not in front of my sister. Ah. The girl pouted softly before reluctantly nodding and carefully going back to nuzzling the girl. Doesn't Hinata puppy like Ino kitty? Ino. Kitty. There was a hesitancy as Naruto asked, eyeing the girl warily. The girl grinned, stretching out casually before flopping down, her back across Hinata's lap as her head rested in Naruto's, and the kitty demands attention. Naruto looked at Hinata quietly. Yeah, we've definitely created a monster. Yes, but I'm a cute one, damn it. Ino agreed, letting off a soft laugh as she arched more across their laps. So, Stinky-chan, having enough fun with those pictures? Well, it does explain why he was walking even stiffer than before. Hanabi agreed, not even reacting to the girl's use of her nickname. Still, it doesn't seem like enough. Oh, it's not. Naruto agreed, but what else is needed? Well, that's up to you. The girl blinked owlishly at the boy. Up to me. But, oh, don't worry. We'll help. But for now, the boy grinned widely. I want you to meet your new sensei in learning how to relax and just be a girl. Chuckling, he reached down and poked lightly on Ino's stomach. Ino-chan here. Ooh. Ino squeaked lightly at the poke, before grinning lazily at Hanabi. We, my girl, are going to be having fun. Back in the Hyuga compound, Neji Hyuga felt a cold chill run down his spine. Something bad was fated to happen to him, he knew it. Yamanaka household. A knock at the door drew a curious Anoich, opening it to reveal the unusually relaxed face of Hiyashi Hyuga. Ah, good evening, Inoichi. Good evening, Hiyashi-san, the man responded hesitantly. What can I do for you tonight? My daughter didn't do anything, did she? No, not that I'm aware of. The man shrugged slightly as he would smile back at the man. It was merely pointed out to me today that I have been letting my social life become rather less than social. Ah, hey. The blonde man nodded nervously himself. I'm not exactly sure I'd be much help. I haven't exactly been the most social of persons since my wife passed. Why I'm here? The dark-haired man nodded. I was recently posed a question that, considering the similarities between our wives, I thought I should pose to you as well. That being, do you really want to meet your wife again without having given her plenty of kinky to watch? The Hyuga clan head responded, his face completely straight and somber. Inoichi paused a long moment, staring back at the man in front of him. His mind raced through the possibilities. I'll get my coat. We'll see what we can find at the bar. Nay. If nothing else. Hiyashi spoke up, looking around them warily. There is that one club with the off-duty kunoichi that we could always visit afterwards. The man froze slightly, shifting nervously. You mean that club? Well, we do technically own it. The man coughed into his hand. Might as well enjoy it, don't you agree? Does she still work there? Inoichi responded nervously. Why, yes. I do believe she's one of the managers now, Hiyashi responded, slowly grinning, and as I recall, she did leave that offer. Well, the blonde man flushed brightly. We have probably put off taking her up on it long enough, don't you think? Indeed, the man responded with a sage nod. Yeah, I'll get my coat. I thought you might. The spirit realm. Finally. A blonde woman squealed as she rubbed hands together. Remind me to thank your student profusely when he gets up here. I know. Such a good boy, isn't he? A familiar dark-haired woman responded, always looking after others. And so good with his hands too. The first woman grinned wickedly, to be able to handle both our daughters. Yes. Well, at least we won't have to get all hour from watching them, now will we? What are you two going on about this time? A red-haired woman spoke up as she wandered up behind the two. You getting upset at your husbands again? Nope, Kushkush. The first woman grinned brightly. That magnificent bastard, that's your son, convinced our hubbies to go out and get laid. He did. The redhead squealed happily, before frowning. Wait, does this mean we won't get to watch the kids anymore? Oh, hell no. The dark-haired woman responded. I can't wait until they finally get around to it. Oh, yes, I know. The redhead had a dreamy look in her eyes. Wah, my Naruto is so manly. A blonde man's head popped up, as he looked at the three dreamy looks plastered on the women's faces before sweating softly. I'm not getting out of bed for a week again, am I? Oh, quit complaining, Minato. The blonde woman laughed. Go on, Kushkush. Go reward him for helping make such a fine son. We'll be sure to set the DVR for you, so you don't miss any of the good parts. I swear, if I wasn't dead already, that boy would be the death of me, Minato mock grumbled as he allowed his wife to drag him off. Oh, but what a way to go. The woman leered back, tossing the blonde man over her shoulder and giggling madly as she raced down the hall. See you in a week, ladies.